We are Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Janssen. The show is always live. Broadcast from the studios right here in Auckland Park. Of course, between 9 and 12 every weekday morning, Monday to Friday, that is. We're also live on YouTube. You can watch us back on demand there on our YouTube channel. Today, we're dealing with energy, the energy sector here in South Africa. We're asking you, what is the right energy mix for South Africa? How much nuclear? How much solar energy? How much alternative energies do we have to throw in the basket to make it work for South Africa? That's a question we want you to interact with us on a Monday morning. Of course, at SABC Newsroom is where you can interact with us and give us your views on this topic. But Monday morning, time for the news. Let's go to Elvis Presley.
President Jacob Zuma is set to start a two-day state visit to Nigeria. The Independent Electoral Commission is tallying up the numbers following the first voters' registration weekend ahead of the local government elections. And several high-profile U.S. politicians react to the death of the former First Lady Nancy Reagan upon hearing the news of her passing. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Elvis, good morning to you, and good morning to you at home as well. It's been a very big weekend, and this is what we've got for you on this Monday morning.
They're giving them the tie. They're going to come back for the second. There's a fumble. That's the game.
The Proteas lose the second T20 against Australia on the last ball in a thrilling match at the Wanderers.
That's the goal line there. Here we go now with the kind of rugby we've come to see.
Fiji surge into the lead as they win the Las Vegas Sevens, beating Australia 21-15 in the Cup final.
And here is a chance to make it 3-1. Oh, what a magnificent finish.
And the Nedbank Cup did not fail to entertain as Baroka FC caused the upset of the weekend, beating Chipa United 3-2.
On the afternoon, watch it.
And those are the stories that are topping our headlines for today in sports. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. That's all coming up a little bit later, but right now your top story this morning. President Jacob Zuma starts a two-day state visit to Nigeria tomorrow. Relations with the West African powerhouse have been uneasy over the past few years, and the president will be looking to improve political and economic ties.
South Africa and Nigeria are undoubtedly the continent's economic leaders, but it's no secret that neither country is in good shape. Oil is Nigeria's main export, and the plunge in prices has affected their country's revenue. South Africa, on the other hand, is battling slow growth and unemployment. While companies like MTN and MultiChoice have invested in Nigeria, they have found themselves at odds with Nigerian regulators, a topic also likely to come up during the visit. But Nigerians say they welcome South Africa's investments.
The environment is very conducive for South Africans to come here and then invest in Nigeria, where the labor is very cheap, and the government is very willing to assist South African investors to come to Nigeria.
More than 120 South African companies operate in Nigeria in various sectors, including telecommunications, banking, retail and aviation. The visit by President Jacob Zuma to Nigeria has been described by some analysts as a chance for the two giants to reset their relations. This in a bid to reaffirm their position as Africa's political and economic powerhouses. Mzwandi Lembech, SABC News, Abuja, Nigeria.
The Independent Electoral Commission, the IEC, is tallying up the numbers following the first voter registration weekend ahead of the local government elections. The IEC hopes to add 1 million new names to the voters' roll. Now, there were disruptions at some of the country's 22,000 voting stations.
The final day of registration and still polling stations here closed, and little activity at these makeshift polling stations outside the hostel. Residents continue to boycott registration, fuming over the planned demarcation in the area. In Khayelitsha, demarcation issues also saw 2 polling stations remain closed. A group of angry residents prevented IEC officials from entering the venues.
This area falls under Ward 95, not under Ward 97. But this year, abruptly there's a change, and without the area being consulted.
Registration went smoothly also in Limpopo, despite disruptions in Vuwani near Tanin over the demarcation issue.
We had engaged the IEC. We're also going to be engaging the community leaders there to make sure that we allow the citizens of the area to register themselves for the coming elections.
The IEC aimed to register at least 9 million potential voters. Mangwaba Mchunu, SABC News.
Now we'll get an update from the IEC a little bit later, just after 10 o'clock, so you have to stay tuned for that. Now, several high-profile U.S. politicians reacted to the death of the former First Lady Nancy Reagan via Twitter upon hearing the news of her death. Nancy Reagan, the former actress who was fiercely protective of her husband Ronald Reagan through a Hollywood career, 8 years in the White House, an assassination attempt, and her husband's Alzheimer's disease, died aged 94.
Drugs take away the dream from every child's heart and replace it with a nightmare.
Former First Lady Nancy Reagan has died. The Reagan Library said she died of congestive heart failure at her Los Angeles home on Sunday. The former First Lady saw the late U.S. President Ronald Reagan, who died in 2004, through 8 years in the White House, years that included an assassination attempt and later Alzheimer's disease. An actress by trade, Reagan went on to become one of the most influential First Ladies in U.S. history. She will be buried next to her late husband at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. Reagan was 94 years old.
Now today our theme is energy and the energy mix for South Africa. Now, Lesotho's Moela hydropower plant has been generating 72 megawatts of electricity daily since it was opened in 1999. It is part of the multi-million rand Lesotho Highlands Water Project, which transfers water to South Africa.
Tar roads have opened access to many remote parts of Lesotho, but for some, even living in the shadow of internationally recognized sites like Mahalidem has not brought change. But there might be light at the end of the tunnel, courtesy of 6 women in their solar power training.
When the circuit is damaged, I look at diota and I repair the equipment.
Manapo Agente is 57. Her only education was primary school. Mama Karapito is 36. She didn't even finish primary school. Now they're installing solar power systems for lighting and charging electronic devices.
I will repair many things. Then I will get money.
The men of Harangkong are also seeing the light.
All my life, I've believed that for one to be an engineer, they have to go to a tertiary institution. Well, that theory has been blown out of the water by simple ladies from a rural village in Lesotho. Ntakwana Ngatani, SABC News, Hasangkong in Lesotho.
Now, what do you make of that? Unbelievable story. You can do it too. Now, more than ever, the United States is turning away from conventional energy and embracing new, cleaner alternatives. Analysis from the United States Energy Information Administration predicts that solar will account for more than half of all electric generation in 2016.
When Anya Schoolman flicks a switch in her Washington, D.C. home, there's a good chance the power source is right above her head.
people really like the idea of making their own clean energy themselves. And people who already own their own home are often very happy to invest a little bit more to make their own little power plant on the roof.
Solar power set a new record in 2015 with 7.3 gigawatts of capacity across US commercial, residential and larger scale installations. And although solar energy makes up less than 1% of the US electricity generated, the industry has grown quickly in places like DC, where there are decent financial incentives.
Most of these systems will cut about 2/3 off the total amount of electricity produced in the house. So that's a really big drop.
Advocates for solar-generated energy say it's not only a money saver, but also an important step in the fight against climate change. And with almost 100 million homes worldwide predicted to run on the power of the sun alone by 2020, the industry's expansion is gearing up for another record-breaking year. While coal and natural gas remain the biggest power sources in the United States, the country's migration towards cleaner, renewable energy means the future for the solar market looks bright. Kevin McAleese, SABC News, Washington.
Well, there was a song called "Don't Let the Sun Come Down on Me," but here in South Africa it's very relevant because we have the sun to create that energy source. We're asking you that question today. What is the right energy mix for this country? That's the question that we pose to you. We'd like to find out from you because, as you know, there's a number of energy mixes around. There's solar, there is nuclear power, and there's, of course, conventional power as well, and some call it dirty power from the coal stations. So the question, that is the question there. Let us know on the Facebook page as well as the Twitter handle. But Eben will tell us more.
Yes, Arvis, it's clear if we want to industrialize our economy, we're going to need a lot of energy. Where are we going to get the energy? Well, we're dealing with that question today. Of course, South Africa has, high levels of renewable energy goals, and that's to generate 42% of its power needs through renewable energy resources by the year 2030. That according to the Transport Minister, and also, that's according to Transport Minister Dipuo Peters, speaking at the opening to the first solar-powered airport in George. Peters said sources of renewable energy that have been identified to meet this target include onshore wind, concentrated solar, thermals, biomass, solid and biogas. Now, to talk to us about some of these alternatives, but also to give us his views on what mix we should be looking at, Alvin Smith is with us. He's the CEO of the Southern African Alternative Energy Association. A very good Monday morning to you, Mr. Smith. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Let's start at the beginning. We're asking our viewers the question on screen we're asking of our viewers today is, with the unique challenges that South Africa has as a nation, we understand where our economy is and what are the infrastructure development goals and other goals that we have. What is the right energy mix to achieve our goals? What do you say to that, sir? What do you think?
Asking different people in different industries, you're going to get different answers. It's obviously a bit of a political thing. Representing the renewable energy industry in this country, I obviously would like to see as much as possible. But the reality is that we need more from a climate change point of view, especially.
Yeah.
Because coal is dirty, as you said.
Coal is dirty for sure, but we kind of invested in it at the moment, our new power stations and the like, and we've put a lot of money into it. And let's be frank, South Africa needs a lot of energy. And we'll even need more energy going forward to meet the 5% growth forecasts that we need in order for everyone in South Africa to be happy, as it were. Nuclear energy has been painted with a black brush in recent times, but it's not all negative, is it? If we are going to meet the development goals that we've set for ourselves, nuclear energy has to be part of the mix. Do you agree?
Not entirely. We can do without it. The problem is that it takes a long time to get it off the ground, to get it to produce, and it's very, very expensive. In the long run, there's also arguments that possibly it's not as cheap as what it's made out to be when you come to the mitigation of the problem of nuclear.
Can you just expand that a little bit? Because, you know, recently when we had the State of the Nation address, the Energy Minister made it very clear that nuclear energy has to form part of our mix because South Africa will need a lot of energy to industrialize the nation, but also to grow our economy. And simply going the renewable route in the short term will not suffice.
Precisely, the renewable part, we're talking about wind and solar, it's not always there. The wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun only shines during the daytime, although we've got some of the best resources in the world. The nuclear, yes, okay, if we look at it from that point of view, it can do a lot, and it's sustainable right through the day, through 24 hours of the day.
As the South African Alternative Energy Association, what's the overall picture that you would like to see with regards to our energy solution in the medium and longer term?
If we could do what the goal is, which is another question that you're going to get different answers to. If we can get to that, yes, it's going to be great, and it's going to solve a lot of these problems, such as the mix from a climate change point of view.
Yeah.
Renewables such as solar is cheap, and it is getting cheaper all the time. And of course, coal-fired energy is going up all the time. The price is right.
The price is right for renewable energy. Tell us about the kind of alternative energy sources that South Africans are maybe not really introduced to every day. Things like when we talk about hydro maybe and waste, we understand, of course, every day we hear about solar. We're the third best solar site in the world and so forth. We all know that. But what about the other ones? What about hydro and waste and these kinds of things? And how much do they add to our overall mix? And also how, as you said, how cheap and how easily available are these?
Hydro, in this country, we don't have a lot of sources of hydro energy. The other ones that come in is more on a small scale basis. Biogas is growing quite nicely in our country. Biomass, there's some plants coming online. The low-hanging fruit is still solar water heating and solar PV. Once we can get NERSA to give us the go-ahead that we can do net metering, as it's called, there's going to be an explosion of PV, rooftop PV in this country.
The cleaner power model we see now in the United States, they've taken big steps forward. They're talking about generating more than half of their energy needs in a clean sort of way. South Africa, comparable to the United States, and then setting that goal. When do you think we'd be in a space where more than half of our energy needs are met through, let's call it, alternative sources?
Not before 2030, not with the current policies that is set by government and set by Department of Energy. After that, they're talking about half by 2050, which sounds far away, but it's not really. It's
and cost-wise, if we can conclude this interview, just if you can give us an overview of the cost of these sources comparable to what we see in the media.
Solar is almost on a par with coal-fired energy. Wind is cheaper, but wind can really only be done on a utility scale, such as they're doing in the Eastern Cape and on the West Coast. Solar plants, yes, nicely. Prices coming down all the time. We can't really compare it rand for rand because you first have to pay for your capital expenditure, and then for the next, say, 15 years, it comes for free.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Smith, thank you very much for joining us today. Of course, we're talking about the right energy mix. We're talking about dealing with energy here on Newsroom this morning. Mr. Arvin Smith is the Chief Executive Officer of the Southern African Alternative Energy Association. Mr. Smith, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Now we're asking you the question, of course, that is, what do you think is the right energy mix for South Africa? Do you see nuclear? Do you see solar, hydro? What do you see in there? What are your views? We seem to have a lot of views on social media at SABC Newsroom. That's where you can share it with us this morning. Now, Russia, of course, remains at the forefront of nuclear technology. That some consider to be the best way to clean up energy supplies. But Russia is also the world's biggest exporter of natural gas and has an economy reliant on fossil fuels. Jack Kapok filed this report from Moscow.
Russia is one of the world's energy powerhouses, the largest exporter of natural gas, the third biggest producer of oil. It was the first country to have used nuclear energy to power electricity in homes, and Russia has remained at the forefront of nuclear technology, developing fast neutron reactors which use less uranium and produce less nuclear waste. But some critics say Russia should be looking into greener sources and to move away from nuclear power.
This energy, the nuclear energy, is heavily subsidized by Russian government. Without these subsidies, Russian nuclear industry would never survive. The annual subsidization of Russian nuclear industry is about $2 billion equivalent per year.
The Chernobyl disaster in Ukraine in 1986, then part of the Soviet Union, was the world's first catastrophic nuclear disaster. A reactor exploded, sending a radioactive plume into the atmosphere. Chernobyl remains uninhabitable, and the total effects of the radiation are still unknown. Due to Russia's powerful fossil fuel industry, green power is not a government priority, but people here tend to be understanding of the difficulties.
Access to clean energy is difficult to get across Russia, and it's also a big problem globally. But I see there are some advances in that.
I see two problems with clean energy in Russia. One, that the country is really big, and the other is the weather here. We have very few sunny days.
In 2013, Russia decided to hold off building more nuclear power plants due to an energy surplus. Russia's 34 nuclear reactors provide 18% of the country's electricity. But this is a country still heavily dependent on fossil fuels, like oil, gas and coal. Jack Kapok, SABC News, Moscow.
Of course, today we're dealing with energy, alternative and otherwise. We ask you the question, what is the ideal mix? What's the ideal mix for South Africa to be successful, to industrialize the country, to grow the economy? I'm sitting here with Tsetse Monari. He's not going to speak to me now. We'll talk a little bit later. He's just here to show some support. But what do you think, quickly, before we carry on, Tsetse, what do you think is the ideal mix for us to go forward and industrialize our country, but also maintain the ideals of clean energy?
It's a bit difficult for us, especially in our situation. I mean, nuclear is really so much more expensive, and over the long run, we probably will still keep on paying. And also hydro, we're not doing that well with our water resources. We are quite a dry country. And coal, of course.
We're heavily invested in the coal space right now.
Exactly, yeah. So we need to look at a greener ways of providing it. Solar, we have lots of it. I mean, a lot of people say the sun only shines during the day, but there's so much sunlight actually that comes through.
Are you saying the sun shines at night?
Sometimes it does. No, but if we plan it properly, we can actually do with solar.
Okay, that's going to be a riveting interview. I'm going to speak to Tsetse, I think at about 20 minutes from now, 20 to the hour, Tsetse is going to come and tell us how the sun actually shines at night. I'd like to hear about that. Anyhow, lots of other stuff. Of course, the Independent Electoral Commission has started to tally its numbers following the first voters' registration weekend ahead of the forthcoming local government elections here in South Africa. As you can imagine, lots of traction on social media. Let's have a look at, what some people are saying. What were some of the difficulties? Naya Bing, he says, I need to register to vote. Well, if you missed it, my dear, you can come back next month, the 9th and the 10th. DeSanti says, young people, we're letting old people dictate our future. Register to vote. You should listen more to old people. Big Head Milo says, if you're 18 plus and really care about your future, go register to vote. Says Big Head Milo. Play your part. Says, good morning, South Africa. Did you go and register to vote this weekend? If you didn't, you can't complain. This one from Utikinyoni says, I believe the campaign to get people to register to vote should be more than campaigning for votes by small parties. Yes, it ended up being a little bit of a campaign trail over the weekend, but that's the nature of the beast. It is an election year here in South Africa. It's going to be a hotly contested affair a little bit later in the year. But let's move on and take a quick look at what other people are seeing in the rest of the world. We start in the United States with the New York International Times, of course. There reports that Nancy Reagan, the influential and stylish wife of the 40th President of the United States, who unabashedly put Ronald Reagan at the center of her universe, but became a political figure in her own right. She died yesterday at a home in Los Angeles. She was 94 years old. Then, across the pond in Europe, the Times says British patrol boats, including a Royal Navy ship, are to be deployed to the Greek coast in an attempt to ease the migrant crisis engulfing Europe. Finally, in China, the South China Morning Post, Morning Post, that's correct, reports that Egypt has accused the Palestinian Islamist movement Hamas and the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood of involvement in last year's killing of the country's top prosecutor, Hisham Barakat. Let's do a quick roundup of the courts here in South Africa on this Monday morning. We'll start in the capital here. Of course, this story, a man who allegedly circulated an email claiming top-ranking officials and politicians wanted to assassinate President Jacob Zuma, is expected to appear in the Pretoria Magistrates Court. Then in Johannesburg, modelling company boss David de Villiers is expected to return to the High Court sitting at Palm Ridge. De Villiers faces 38 counts of rape, sexual assault, indecent assault, sexual grooming, possession and accessing of child pornography, as well as fraud and theft. Then, in the Eastern Cape, a 26-year-old man allegedly hacked his girlfriend to death with an axe. And on a farm in Butterworth, is expected to appear in the Butterworth Magistrates Court on a charge of murder this very morning. Time now for us to take a short break. When we return, Albus will have an interesting interview for us when we talk about solar energy. Don't go away.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Now, it's estimated that there are 1.2 billion people without access to energy, and another billion who are connected to an unstable national grid. But it has been estimated that almost 100 million households worldwide may be powered by solar panels by the year 2020. Now, that is 4 years from now. That's according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance Report. Here in South Africa, we are set to launch the largest solar farm in Africa in De Aar in the Northern Cape next week. That's a huge stepping stone in the way forward. Now, joining us from our Cape Town studios in Cape Town is the operations manager at Solar World, Adrian Rootman. A very good morning to you, Adrian, and welcome.
Good morning, Evan.
It's Elvis Adrian, but just to take you back to this story, South Africa is leaning towards nuclear energy as some of the main solutions and the energy mix for South Africa. Do you think that South Africa should rather be looking for more environmentally friendly solutions like solar?
For sure, I think we should definitely look into alternative methods of generating power, especially I think South Africa has got this unique opportunity to really produce 100% clean energy with all the solar available, and also not solar but also wind and all the other options out there. So it's a little bit strange that we really focus everything towards nuclear, where you really have this option of having 100% clear energy, projects lasting up to 20 years of little to no maintenance. So I think for me it's a no-brainer that we should really invest the same kind of money and effort towards really implementing something that is for generations to pass, not harming the environment.
Is there a sense, though, that solar will have the very same impact and stability as nuclear power has?
I think that solar has got a little bit of challenges when it comes to baseload production. This is where the main advantage of nuclear comes in. But also, it doesn't mean that solar alone will solve the problem. We have to look at an energy mix based on renewables that could typically add to solving the problem of baseload PV. Also, if you consider the cost or the money that's spent currently on getting nuclear going, if you have the same money and effort spent to solve the problems that you have with solar PV in terms of baseload production, for sure you can also solve that. I believe the technology is almost there, in some cases already there. So it's important to then rather change the mindset and say that maybe solar or maybe some other renewables together with solar is really the option, rather than just, no, it's not an option because nuclear. I think if you look into the option of using, let's say, the controlling and really just the switching on and off of PV plants and renewables in general, it does make more sense. You can react very quickly to be able to stabilize the grid. For example, with nuclear, you have months of running up and down and downtime that could really leave us in the dark, like we've seen a while ago. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things of renewables, it's inherently also modular, which means that a single component failure will not result in a catastrophe. It will really result in a small part of the production being offline, mm-hmm. where we've seen with a single bolt before can really have a big problem for our country.
Now, I'm very excited about this one because I believe that South Africa is set to launch the largest solar farm in Africa on the 17th of March in the R in the Northern Cape. Now, that is a step in the right direction, would you say, because we do have the resource, which is the sun.
Yeah, look, I'm very excited about this. This project in the R forms part of the renewable procurement program that was launched a couple of years ago. And this program would see really thousands of megawatts being connected to our grid, adding renewable energy into our mix. And I think this is really a clear indication, a step in the right direction. What makes me more excited about it really is the fact that we have, in such a short time, achieved so much. If you look at the quality of the projects and if you look at the potential that we really are getting out of these projects, it really shows that renewables are feasible. Renewables is quick to implement. Renewables is a easy and low-cost solution to solve our energy crisis in the short term. But also, if you can start to set out long-term goals and also have an action plan together with some funding to this, it's clear that we will achieve those goals.
Now, why did it take South Africa so long really to embark on this type of thing? Because the sun is always there, especially in the Northern Cape. It's ample power at your disposal. Why did we wait so long?
I think a couple of years ago, electricity in our country was a little bit, the cost of electricity was a little bit too low, and also the cost of solar modules were very expensive. Recent times, we've seen that electricity pricing rapidly went up, but also what we saw during the same time is the cost of solar PV came down dramatically with a lot of technology breakthrough, with some large-scale production. We really see now that technology is 100% feasible, and it's interesting to see that in countries with radiation less than half of ours, the technology is already financially and technically feasible. This means if you would implement the same module in South Africa, you get double the yield over the 20-year or 25-year period, sometimes 30-year period, that you would get for the same capital expenditure in a country in Europe, for example.
Mm-hmm. When that power plant comes online, it will probably bring, you indicated about 1,000 megawatts to the grid?
No, look, I think it's a 170 megawatt plant, so I didn't now do the calculations, but it's a significant amount of renewable energy that adds to this. And this is, like I mentioned, also part of a project that runs over a couple of years, or a program that runs over a couple of years, which we just call the REAP program. I'm sure you saw this in the news before. And I think to look at this project specifically, it's just, again, a clear indication of what can be achieved with solar. And even though it's still a drop in the ocean, it's something that shows that we can really achieve our goals with this.
It also seemed like the Independent Producers Program, Power Producers Program, has seen 194 billion rand invested in South African foreign direct investment. Now, how can we continue to attract private investment into solar energy products as well as other alternatives into the country, and to make sure that we do keep that up in order to boost our economy?
Look, I think it's an important question, and we should really sit around a table and talk about this as government and as also the general public. But I think for us the most important thing would be legislation and policy. It should really not hinder this, but rather facilitate this. And it's clear that from now we will see an overspill beyond just the IPP program, but into the commercial and agricultural sector, and even the private sector. And it's really there where the policy needs to be also updated to make sure that the technology there grows and get the same sort of efficiency in terms of implementation that we also had with the IPP. So I think in long-term sustainability of the growth of these, and also it should be clear that we have this long-term plan set out. And so investors will see this, and they will see really that there's no hindrance in terms of this. It's going to be organic growth towards a sustainable energy mix in South Africa, and then I believe we will see that investment will keep on coming.
Now, as Solar World, you're obviously a proponent of solar power. So what would be your advice, Adrian, to households out there that want to switch to solar? Is it still very expensive to do that, or what can they do in order to come off the grid that is so troublesome?
I think there's a couple of different discussions regarding the same topic. And for me, it's always, we must be clearer in the way we spend our money, because this is really the feasible approach. I think living the green idea is not always just buying a product and using it, but it's also having a lifestyle that adapts to make sure that we are sustainable. So, for example, if the moment you start to save electricity in your daily activities and you get into this habit, you would find that achieving your renewable goal for yourself as a private household is not now as expensive anymore. And also, I think another concept out there is something that I advocate very strongly, and this is grid-tied PV for households. This is a way of decentralizing PV production around the country. And this is where everybody would say, you know what, instead of being 100% independent, I rather just want to play my part in this whole mix and add my part. So that means I'm not 100% independent of the grid, but I am neutral to the grid. So I'm not using more than what I produce. And that is the most cost-effective way of implementing PV. And obviously, if you now get to a point where you really want to also have the function of a backup, let's say a battery bank, that becomes a little bit more tricky and also a little bit more expensive, which might push it just a little bit out of the average household financial means. But again, like I mentioned before, the grid-tied PV concept has been proven for the last 20 years globally to be a feasible solution. And now with our additional radiation that we have in the country, this does help to make it an easy, achievable target. The main thing here, I believe, would just be it's a mindset change. So it's really an investment rather than just a short-term result that you're gaining for. And also, again, we run into the situation where policymakers and the local and also the local municipalities and authorities should also help the private household to be able to do this, because I think that is currently the biggest hurdle to overcome a mass implementation on a residential scale and also commercial of these projects.
Adrian, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on Newsroom.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
That was Operations Manager at Solar World, Adrian Brootman, telling us about solar and the benefits thereof. And that's our theme for today. We're asking you also that very important question. Of course, what do you think is the right mix for South Africa? We talked about solar. You also heard about nuclear power. You also know about our dirty power, as they call it. Is that perhaps what we need to invest in future? Well, let us know what's on your mind. Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Like us on the Facebook page. If you like us there, you become part of this elite and growing family here on Newsroom. Become informed. It's over to you, Evan.
Yeah, thanks, Elvis. Of course, today also marks the start of Israeli Apartheid Week. This campaign aims to raise awareness about Israel's ongoing settler colonial project, as it's called, and apartheid policies over the Palestinian people. Now, there have been lots of comments, of course. I'll tell you why a little bit later in the show. At about 10:30, I'll be speaking to Professor Farid Esak about, he's written some controversial articles in the last couple of weeks in the run-up to Israel Apartheid Week. We'll also speak to the Afro-Middle East Center, and then we'll get BDS in. They, of course, are the organizers of Israel Apartheid Week. We'll have that at about 10:30 today. So if you're interested, that's an interview that you simply have to catch. But let's go and have a look at... let's take a look at the comments first. YCLSA Ward 4 says, let's support the Palestinians in Israel Apartheid Week, organize events, demonstrations, and blitz in your areas, I think. Mwiseli says, every year in South African universities we have to deal with a bombardment of highly funded propaganda missions by the Israeli government. Talking about Israel Apartheid Week. That one from Mwiseli. Then Desire Israel? Israel Apartheid Week and BDS are anti-Semitic. This isn't a question. It's age-old prejudice against Jews. Read history, says, is it Desire or Desiree? I'm not quite sure. This one is Julie, for sure. IP, for Jewish Israelis, settler colonialist fragmentation of Palestine is a reality that doesn't need to be changed. Talking about Israel Apartheid Week, then Rabbi Yaakov Menken says they want that apartheid wall to come down because it stops terrorists from slaughtering Jews. That one from the rabbi. Yes, it's an emotionally charged topic, I can tell you. We're going to have that discussion probably a couple of days this week. Today we'll be speaking to the Afro-Middle East Center. We'll also be speaking to academic Professor Farid Esak, and then the organizers, of course, BDS, who run the campaign. But let's take a quick look at what's on Newsroom's Facebook page. We'll start in the US. Ray Tomlinson, considered to be the godfather of email, has died. This according to his employer, the Raytheon Company. He was 74 years old. And statistics, South Africa field workers around the country will visit sampled households as from today to collect data during their community survey for 2016. Finally, police in the Eastern Cape have arrested a 26-year-old man for allegedly murdering his 34-year-old girlfriend. It's a very interesting story. That little bit of an age gap there, maybe it is a communication gap that developed over time. On our Newsroom Facebook page, that's where you can find that story on this Monday morning. Hope it's not a blue Monday. Let's take a short commercial break. When we come back, I'll be speaking to Tsietse Monari. He's here. And Elvis is also standing by to kind of set up a very interesting topic for the next hour. But today, of course, we're dealing with solar and other energies. What's the right energy mix for South Africa is our question. With you after a short break.
Romantic adventure film starring Ivan Buerta and Donnelly Roberts. The story begins in the beautiful vineyards of Paarl in the Western Cape. The adventure takes off when the characters find themselves on the tropical island of Love, Mauritius.
Josephine's work is more interesting and distinguishable. She visits war-stricken zone countries to tell the story of the damage war often leaves behind.
This particular exhibition's case, places that are named after conflict or disaster or war or reconciliation.
And basically what it is it's a collection of the best animated short films from around the world this year. And the idea is to inspire animators and directors with this exciting content. And so that's been offered to us as a cinema, and we're very excited to be screening the animated show of shows here in South Africa.
Join Refulo Mulwa for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom here on SABC News today. We're dealing with South Africa's energy needs. Now, our modern consumption habits have led to serious waste problems across the globe, not just here, with many local landfills overfilled well beyond their capacity. This, in turn, has led to some devastating impacts on both the ecosystems and cultures of the world. As a result, researchers and entrepreneurs are finding ways of recycling the waste and generating energy from it. Could that be our future? Now, Paul Tsietse Monare, he's, of course, our resident meteorologist and, of course, South Africa's most eligible bachelor. He's with us here in studio this morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to you, Tsietse. How are you today?
Very good morning. I'm good, thank you.
Now, you were with us a little bit earlier. We were asking the energy question, of course, what's the right energy mix for us? You want to add conversion of waste into energy, into the mix, simply because we have to. Is that right?
Yeah, certainly. I read somewhere quite a while ago that in the United States, they produce up to something ridiculous, like 250 million tons of waste. That's more than 5 pounds or, just about 2 kilograms of waste per person on their daily use. And that's actually a lot. And it's because of our modern consumption patterns. I mean, we eat, we microwave, we delete, we ruin. That's basically all that we do. And what's happening is that all the landfills are getting filled up. It's full all over the world, and some of the first world nations are actually exporting it to third world nations for them to store it, because they've got a lot of open land, like we do have in places such as the Northern Cape. But then that leads to a lot of social, cultural, and economic problems, and as well as our ecosystems are going into ruin because of this waste. So the next best thing to do is just pack it up nicely, especially the ones that cannot be recycled. Pack it up nicely and take it to a place where they can convert it into energy. And one of the easiest ways that they do that is just basically taking the waste and turning it into electricity by just putting in a combustion chamber, sort of.
Do you burn it?
Yeah, burning it at high temperatures.
Doesn't that then add to global warming as we've been? Yes. Are you supposed to bring clean energy?
No, but in a way, it's a lot cleaner than coal, because already in a way. Yes. It's still a good reduction compared to what coal does. Okay. Because, with plants and so on, plants actually, they absorb carbon. So it's the carbon that already would be in the sky, or would have been in the sky, and it gets converted in a little bit in a more organic way.
And it's also then a surefire way for us to deal with the wastage problems that we have on the planet. But tell us about this biomass energy, the benefits of it, and how do you make it? How do you bring it home to the African continent, if one can say that?
Yeah. Well, the not so great benefit of it is it leads to other things such as deforestation, because wood actually is what works well with getting to biofuel. Yeah. But if you look at it, it's quite a cheaper way of doing this, and we need to clear the landfills. That's what the point of view that we need to look at. Yeah. Because landfills, I mean, they stay there and they stay dirty and they pollute underground water system and so forth, which we really need, especially in places such as South Africa. So we need to clear it off, and the best way to do it is by actually just burning it into turning. We can get methane out of it. We can we can gasify it. We can get a whole lot out of it. Landfill gas can actually be made from that. And one of the cons of it is that it can also create a lot of jobs as well. How many times have you seen people going around picking up waste and
I thought they were recycling.
Yeah,
because this brings me to you talk about this recycling thing. Now my daughter, they all come from school. She's 9 years old. Yeah. She come from school and they say, Dad, each teacher says we must recycle. Yeah. Mom, we must get 4 or 5 different bins. But my wife, she's very resourceful. She says, no, there are gentlemen that come and collect and do the recycling for us, and it's unique to our country, and that's how they sustain themselves. Yeah. This is the explanation to her. She's not very happy because we have to take responsibility for recycling ourselves.
Yeah, and
how do you overcome this unique challenge we have?
That's just the thing about renewable energy and the environment and actually avoiding climate change, that sometimes you do something and then it pollutes or it destroys something else. So it becomes a bit of a catch-22 situation. But we need to take recycling into, it's our own responsibility, and we need to sort that out as soon as possible, especially starting with, teaching from younger kids and so on. And even if you do get people like we do get, I see these guys usually in the the morning, going down the roads with their little carts and picking up plastics and bottles.
They are waste entrepreneurs.
Some of them, would be called, what do they call them? Inner city scavenging. That's basically one of the words that I've heard before. But which is really good. We need all those things. And it doesn't matter who does it. We all must just do it. Things that we cannot recycle, though, are the things that we need to take to one of those waste-to-energy entrepreneurs or companies that they can do that for us, because we really need it and we really need the energy. We need to stop relying so much on the fossil fuel side, because the fossil fuel is the largest contributor to the carbon that actually stays in the sky for hundreds of years, making our planet much warmer and warmer.
Yeah.
So it's not really such a bad thing that we're still burning it. And the burning is not as bad as when we burn coal.
That being said, where are we then in this process of turning our waste to energy, not just in South Africa, but the wider world, especially the African continent, one would think?
I was very fortunate to go to Oslo not so long ago, and there, they actually, Norway is one of the largest and leading sort of population when it comes to burning their waste and turning it into energy. They're really, really doing good, but the rest of the world is slightly lagging behind. I mean, people are not taking it as serious, just like any other renewable energy source or way of getting us electricity. People are taking it much, much slower than they should be. You heard with the solar energy, we've got so much sun and we've had it for so long, but we just are not using it.
Who paid for this trip to Oslo, by the way?
Where does this fit into?
No, I'm just
I'm just kidding. There's a company.
Don't have to explain. I'm just putting your leg on Monday morning.
I'd be very happy to tell you. It's the IPCC, actually, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
You just sound guilty, man. You just sound guilty. You don't have to qualify yourself to me. Anyhow, Tete Unari is a bundle of fun. He's with us every Monday and Thursday, where we look at, the environment, renewable energy, and all the things that, we all should be taking much more serious. He's going to set up to go and do the weather for us. But before we go to that, of course, the political world is mourning the death of Nancy Reagan. Some people call her the greatest First Lady of all time. Let's take a look at some of the comments with regards to the passing of the legendary First Lady Nancy Reagan. No comments? Okay, if there are no comments, let's go over to Elvis. Elvis is standing by to set up the next hour.
Well, thank you, Evan. Now, as you know, that we're talking about the energy mix this morning, and it's all about energy. But do you realize, or do you know, that Eskom received an increase from NERSA? 9.4%. That is the increase they received. By the way, before I get to that, let me just remind you of the question. The right energy mix for South Africa, let us know on on our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. Now, going back to the story of Eskom, 9.4%, that's the tariff increase that they have received, and that is very worrying. The General Secretary of FEDUSA, Dennis George, is joining me in studio to just give us his views. A very good morning to you, Mr. George. We're setting this up for after 10 o'clock, but just briefly, you are not very happy about this particular increase by Eskom. Why?
Yeah, look, this increase by Eskom for us, and this has been something that's been coming over for the last number of years now, that consumers, workers, businesses are confronted with these above-inflation increases. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, government tell us that we must tighten our belts. Mm-hmm. In the same context, the Reserve Bank comes and increase our bond rates, increase what we pay for the motor cars, and that is a chain reaction, and the workers can only absorb so much, and then that is going to lead to a situation when they're going to bargain for collective wages, then they're going to put up amounts that is also going to be above inflation.
So it's all got an effect on everything else and spiraling to everything else that we work towards.
Yes, no, that is quite a vicious circle. Because it causes prices in the economy to rise faster than economic growth is rising, and that is going to create people to become poorer and poorer, and for us that is something that is very critical and something that we must avoid.
Now, after the news at 10 o'clock, we will continue this discussion on the impact that this Eskom increase will have on you and on ordinary workers in South Africa with FEDUSA General Secretary Mr. Dennis George. So you have to stay tuned. But right now, Let's take a look at, in fact, we're going to take it to the top of the hour. We'll be back. In fact, we're not taking the weather forecast right now. We'll do it right, I think, in the next hour. For now, let's take a break, and we'll be back at the top of the hour with the... In fact, Tsetse is here. Hang on.
Tsetse is back. Tsetse is over there. Yeah.
Tsetse is here with your weather forecast.
Hi there, welcome from the weather desk. So let's have a look at this weather quickly, and you'll see possibilities of showers now coming into the Northern Cape province, which is basically good news. We need the rainfall along those parts, as well as over the southwestern parts into the Western Cape and some part of the Eastern Cape province for today, as well as over tomorrow. But tomorrow, most of it will be shifting towards KwaZulu-Natal and over the central parts. Hopefully it comes to Gauteng, as we're expecting hot conditions there over the next couple of days. Here are your temperatures, quite a hot start into Pretoria. Temperatures at 36 degrees, your maximum temperatures this afternoon. Lusaka is at 29, 26 for Harare, and Beras at 32, 29 for Antananarivo, and Walvis Bay, nice and cool at 24 degrees. We're expecting rain towards Windhoek and maybe even into Upington with a maximum of 32 degrees. Some partly cloudy skies are expected over the central part of your tropics, especially here into the DRC, as well as over some parts of Zambia. Do expect rainy conditions there, and there's possibilities of thunder showers going all the way towards Luanda. Your conditions for Dar es Salaam, again, still a lot of rainfall expected along those parts. So the coastal areas of Tanzania should expect a bit of showers. Kigali, also rainy conditions are coming up then. Temperatures are a bit cooler, 27 degrees. And hot weather as usual towards Juba, 39. Bangui is at 38 over CAR, and rainy weather for Yaoundé going down to Brazzaville as well as over Libreville. Do expect possibilities of rain there. Kinshasa is also going to be quite warm at a maximum of 34. Luanda 32 and Lilongwe 27. Nice and hot weather for the northern parts. No chance of rainfall is expected, which is quite normal. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Clear conditions from Agadez going all the way up to Seba as well as over Al Jouf, with a maximums of around 27 to 29 degrees. Mecca is hot at 35, and then look at that. Possibilities of rain for our Riyadh, not something you see every day. And look at these two, 40 degrees towards El Fasher as well as over Khartoum. Quite a hot day is expected over Sudan. And then possibilities of cloudy conditions coming in towards places such as Rabat. Marrakesh is going to be a bit sunnier there. Partly cloudy skies coming through for Lagos, and also rainy weather is expected there. But then temperatures for places such as Niamey and N'Djamena are going to be quite hot. We're expecting a scorcher today. 43 for Niamey. N'Djamena 41, could go as high as 45 for today. Lagos is at 32. I did mention there's a bit of rain that is expected there, going towards Togo as well, and up over the central regions into Bamako. Maximums of 39 are expected there. And then much cooler weather is expected. Look at the contrast here. 40s just along the southern part of the west. And then those teens for Rabat, Algiers. So much cooler weather is expected closer to places such as Tunisia as well as over Algeria. Las Palmas reaching a maximum of 18 degrees. Senegal as an average of 27. So nice and warm weather is expected along those parts. That is it from the weather desk for now. Stay tuned. There'll be more later.
How does this extreme heat affect basic conditions of living?
Food spoils more readily, and the risk of food poisoning outbreaks or food poisoning in a household.
Should we experience another heat wave soon, and it's coming?
First sign is always thirst. Thirst is a sign that already your body started to be dehydrated, and that's a very early sign that most people will be able to sort of pay attention to and then act on. That doesn't warrant any serious medical attention. But the minute that you start to feel slightly nauseous, that you start to feel dizzy, that's a sign that you need to stop what you're doing, get out of the sun, get into a cool area, slow down your intensity, get hydrated, cool down.
Join Dr. Sello Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10 in the morning.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
It's 900 hours Central Africa time on this Monday, the 7th of March 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. If you've just joined us, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios, Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. You have to stay with us as we broadcast until 12. Now, remember that we're also asking you a very important question this morning, and that question relates to the energy mix of South Africa. What is the right energy mix for our country? Let me know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at all your news headlines. President Jacob Zuma is set to start a 2-day state visit to Nigeria. The independent, in fact, we're moving a little bit further away, but the independent electoral IEC is tallying up all the numbers following the first voters registration weekend ahead of the local government elections, and we'll give you an update right after this. And several high-profile U.S. politicians react to the death of former First Lady Nancy Reagan upon hearing the news of her passing. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall what you've seen a little bit earlier in terms of your sports news here in the morning. A very good morning once again, Kendall.
A very good morning to you too, Elvis. Sports is a big thing this morning. It was a hectic weekend for a lot of sports people as well as fans. And here's a sneak peek of what we've got for you in the sports later on today.
They're giving them the tie. They're going to come back for the second. There's a fumble. That's the game.
The Proteas lose the second T20 against Australia on the last ball in a thrilling match at the Wanderers.
That's the goal line there. Here we go now with the kind of rugby we've come to see from Fiji.
Fiji surge into the lead as they win the Las Vegas Sevens, beating Australia 21-15 in the Cup final.
Here's a chance to make it 3-1. Oh, what a magnificent finish.
The Nedbank Cup did not fail to entertain as Baroka FC caused the upset of the weekend, beating Chipa United 3-2. As you can see, it's like full to the brim of sports. 10:20s when we come through with that. Be sure to stick around for it. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Now, the Federation of Unions of South Africa, FEDUSA, has warned that the latest electricity tariff increase will negatively affect both consumers and business. The General Secretary, Dennis George, says that the cost of electricity is straining the economy. Now, on Monday, as you can recall last week, the National Energy Regulator granted Eskom a 9.4% increase for the 2016-2017 financial year. That's effective from the 1st of April. Eskom had applied, as you also know, for a 16.6% increase. Now, joining us in the studio is the General Secretary of FEDUSA, Mr. Dennis George. Mr. George, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning.
Now, you indicated earlier that you're not very happy about this, but your reaction in total to the energy crisis that we currently have in South Africa, as well as the increase that Eskom was granted.
Yes. Look, the big issue is the issue of the cost. This matter is cross-cutting, so it cuts across businesses, whether you're big or small, and it also cuts across consumers, and which include workers. And this particular increases that is above inflation put a serious strain on the economy that's struggling at the moment. We had to downgrade our growth projections for 2016 and 2017. And that is the reason why FEDUSA is concerned. But on the other hand, when businesses feel this kind of pressure, they normally resort to reducing the amount of workers that's working for them as a cost-cutting method, because that is one of the areas that carries the highest expenditure for companies. And so we can expect to see that there's going to be more workers being put out of employment as a result of this electricity increases.
Now, Eskom has already hinted that the 9.4 increase by NERSA might have consequences of keeping the lights on. What do you think we can read into this almost like a threat?
Exactly. I think, really, if everybody has to tighten their belts, I think we're sitting with a monopoly electricity generator that wants to keep a gun against our head and say, look, this is what we want, and if you don't give us, then we're going to switch off the electricity, sort of like, or say, no, we can't do this. I think these people must take the responsibility seriously, that they have to make do with what has been given to them. There's a number of measures that can be introduced if they want to save costs. They can reduce salaries, they can reduce bonuses of executives, and you can see that even workers that is working for Eskom, it's not people that is not well paid. It's really, really well paid. So I think what Eskom should do is to look at ways how they can reduce wastage, how can they reduce costs, and that is going to make a contribution to help the economy to get through this difficult period.
So what you are suggesting as Fiducia is this is all about management. It's not just about just getting an increase. It's about management and how you manage this entire SOE.
Yes, no, look, I think what South Africans, all of us must do, we must learn to get around with less. This thing of the wastage that we see this wastage all over the economy, in government, we see this in the private sector, and that is very, very important, that we must become more productive as a nation, because the productivity of the nation is linked to your competitiveness. And if you want to be a global player that's going to share the growth that you have, it is important that we must become more productive.
As for Fiducia, how do you think this crisis can be averted? Is there perhaps other alternatives that can be utilized?
Sure, definitely. There is ways that we can address these measures, and we've already started speaking to the finance minister after his budget in NEDLAC. And what we have decided to do was now to undertake between government, business, and organized labor is to now meet with investors in New York, later during the week. And we're also going to meet with investors in London and also Boston, because it is important for the social partners to create an environment that is conducive for increased economic growth. Because if the economy grows faster, it means the cake is getting bigger, and therefore those that, when we come to sharing the cake, we can ensure that everybody gets a little bit more. But if the cake is contracting, as is currently the case, then it's going to mean that we have to tighten our belts. And we have to tighten it seriously, yes.
Job creation and economic growth, of course, at the forefront of this particular issue. Will this, if you look at alternatives, are you looking at alternatives as well when you speak to these investors to create that job opportunities that we need in South Africa?
Sure. Look, the first thing that is important is the first step it's investment. New investment into new businesses, and also current businesses expanding. And therefore you can continue to have more workers. Now, job creation is so critical for economic growth, because what it does, it means if a new worker is employed, it means that government gets an extra tax contribution. That worker also have to go and spend in the economy, and so therefore you have on both sides of the sword, you're having moving and momentum forward. So if we can set a really realistic target for job creation and link that to economic growth, and I think from our side, we would be much more better than sitting in the economy that is contracting.
Are you negotiating? Are you talking? Are you engaging Eskom on the potential of this particular blackout that we might see, that they envisage, and talking about the solution that you've put forward, perhaps in terms of speaking to their management to reduce salaries and to look at not increasing their bonuses and so forth?
Yes, no, look, what we've done, we've already started to talk, and we have continuous engagements with Eskom CEO Brian Molefe, and he explained to us, when the crisis started with electricity, it was when there was blackouts. I mean, that was devastating. So we managed the first stage, or the first phase was to address that particular problem. Now we know that the grid is at least a little bit stable, but now we must invest for the future so that we have enough. Because if the economy is going to grow faster, there's going to be more demand for electricity. And therefore, what we're saying to the management of Eskom now is to say, look, you need to get by with less. You can't think that this is an extravagant situation where you make your numbers and you just come to NERSA and say, we want this. It's not going to happen. There's no reality around that stuff. And therefore, everybody is going to be required to become more productive, and the inputs and the outputs has to match.
Mr. George, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with your trip to Hollywood. Where are you going?
No, I'm not going to Hollywood. We're going to New York and we're going to Boston.
All right. Thank you so much. That was the General Secretary of FEDUSA, Mr. Dennis George, in studio. Now, we'll talk to him again soon. Remember, there is a potential for a national wage that we need to talk about, and that will follow in a couple of weeks' time from now, as soon as he comes back from the U.S. Meanwhile, the IEC Chief Electoral Officer, Masutu Moyepia, says that they will release the final figures of the first voters' registration weekend tomorrow. Earlier, the IEC advised those who missed out to register to go to their municipal electoral offices during weekdays and during office hours to do that. Alternatively, people can also wait until the next registration weekend, which is on April the 9th and 10th. The IEC says at least 1 million South Africans visited their registration stations this weekend to check their details of the voting districts or to register. The IEC says that fewer than 20 voting stations out of more than 22,000 reported problems. Now, there were disruptions in Vuwani and Limpopo, where the residents are resisting a planned municipal demarcation. Meanwhile, 4 suspects are expected to appear in court after they stormed into the IEC centres at Parys in the Northern Cape and damaged the IEC material at the weekend. Now, they were taking part in a community protest that targeted the IEC's voter registration process. Now, shortly, we will be engaging with the IEC on the weekend registration, how it went. Meanwhile, investigations are underway following the deaths of 10 people. In fact, we'll come back to that particular story. It seems like we've just changed in track there. President Jacob Zuma starts a 2-day state visit to Nigeria tomorrow. Relations with the West African powerhouse have been uneasy over the past few years, and the president will be looking to improve political and economic ties.
South Africa and Nigeria are undoubtedly the continent's economic leaders, but it's no secret that neither country is in good shape. Oil is Nigeria's main export, and the plunge in prices has affected their country's revenue. South Africa, on the other hand, is battling slow growth and unemployment. While companies like MTN and MultiChoice have invested in Nigeria, they have found themselves at odds with Nigerian regulators, a topic also likely to come up during the visit. But Nigerians say they welcome South Africa's investments.
The environment is very conducive for South Africans to come here and then invest in Nigeria, where the labor is very cheap. And, the government is very willing to assist South African investors to come to Nigeria.
More than 120 South African companies operate in Nigeria in various sectors, including telecommunications, banking, retail and aviation. The visit by President Jacob Zuma to Nigeria has been described by some analysts as a chance for the two giants to reset their relations. This in a bid to reaffirm their position as Africa's political and economic powerhouses. Mzwandi Lembech, SABC News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, President Jacob Zuma starts that 2-day state visit to Nigeria tomorrow. Now, relations with the West African powerhouse have been uneasy over the past few years, and the president will be looking to improve political and economic ties. Let's cross now to Sophia Adengo, who is there. Very good morning to you, Sophia, and welcome.
Good morning.
Is there high anticipation from Nigeria for President Jacob Zuma's visit there?
Well, it's very difficult to speak for a population of almost 180 million, but I think you are right in saying that, there is a welcome openness to having dialogue with the Nigerian government and the South African government, especially in light of the last 6 to 8 months with major companies and investors like MTN and small and medium-sized enterprises struggling within this market and leaving the economies, sort of grappling with what to do with two countries that obviously represent as the lion's share on the continent. So President Jacob Zuma's visit is indeed a welcome development. We have seen on social media pages, on Twitter and on Facebook, that perhaps it's high time that this dialogue is had between both leaders. Obviously, President Muhammad Buhari taking this visit very seriously by extending the invitation to President Zuma, and President Zuma responding by having a large spectrum of delegation along with him as he arrives today in Abuja, which would include foreign affairs ministers, trade and industry, defense and security, to really address the various angles with which Nigeria and South Africa share these political and economic ties. Elvis?
Now, uneasy relations between the two countries, as well as, of course, one of our biggest companies here in South Africa, MTN, in trouble with the authorities there. Will this be part and parcel of the discussion, you think?
I do believe that this will be part of the discussion. MTN, as of October 2015, was given a ban for a security breach of almost $5 billion US. And this $5 billion has been in question as to why the Nigerian Communications Commission had jurisdiction to levy such a heavy fine, and in which manner this fine was given to MTN. MTN has contested and escalating this issue and going to court. As of now, what we do know is that MTN is looking to settle this agreement not only through the Nigerian Communications Commission, but directly with the Nigerian government. So there is no doubt, to bring a certain level of closure, and I guess in terms of numbers for MTN, what the actual fine is, in all fairness, would probably be part of the discussion, along with other economic discussions and really along business lines. President Jacob Zuma and his team are expected to address Nigerian and South Africa Business Forum that was formed not too long ago to help foster these economic relations. So there is no doubt MTN, amongst other issues pertaining to business and doing business and the ease of doing business in this particular part of the country, will definitely be part of these discussions, Elvis.
And is there a feeling among business people that this is maybe the starting point of the president's visit with Nigeria to mend the strained relations that we've seen over the past number of years?
Well, according to analysts, Elvis, there seems to be, an outlook. We have, been speaking to a few economists, and they have said perhaps this is what Nigerian businessmen and South African businessmen and women, who needed this push to understand that both governments back one another when it comes to doing business, and that, this is perhaps a sign of hope. And indeed, if there are any disagreements or any, unusual, sort of circumstances, that they would be tabled and those issues ironed out. In the long run, Nigeria and South Africa have shared a cordial business environment, and if that indeed has been derailed, then the purpose of these conversations and this dialogue is to really get the economies back on track and symbiotic in terms of promoting their commodities exchange and also, servicing each other in terms of leading the way in terms of the economies here on the continent. Elvis.
Thank you so much for your time, Sophia, and that update there. That was Sophia Dengo, live from Nigeria. Now back to one of our top stories this morning. The IEC has claimed its first voter registration weekend as a success. With about 1 million people visiting its stations countrywide on Saturday alone, the Commission says that people came to the stations to register, update their registration details and re-register at new and change voting districts. A few IEC stations among the more than 22,000 nationwide had the operations disrupted, mainly by community protest over service delivery. We're now joined by Simon Mabola, the IEC Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, this morning. A very good morning to you and thank you.
Thank you very much
for joining us. Now, you look tired. It must have been a tough weekend.
Well, energy is still there. The outcomes are encouraging, and that's the source of energy.
Mr. Mabola, are you happy with the voter registration process over the weekend?
Well, overall, we're very elated at the manner in which the process unfolded. From a logistical point of view, a very solid performance. From the performance of staff, very happy with how the staff conducted the process, the capacity of our systems, they held on. So overall, we are quite happy. We are happy for the manner in which the South African citizenry responded to the call. Certainly, a few million people visited our stations throughout the whole weekend. Some of them were engaging with us through other mediums such as Twitter, SMS, Facebook, and so on. So overall, we have a sense that South Africans remain engaged in the democratic process. They remain engaged in local democracy, and they do want to participate in the forthcoming elections to shape the nature of the governance of local communities.
Can you confirm that a target of 1 million, which the IEC had for this voter registration, has been met, and you are happy with that particular number?
Look, the target is for all actions, registration activity before the election itself. We are currently analyzing the data. We should be in a position to communicate the results of this process to the nation tomorrow sometime. But if we've not reached the target, which I doubt, we'll get very close to it.
People have missed this opportunity, or that have. There's some of the areas that couldn't do that or to register. Do they have another opportunity?
We currently are opening municipal offices which are functional between office hours. So those who want to take advantage of the facilities at municipal offices are encouraged to do so.
At the local, so any local municipality, they can walk in, take their ID with them with a proof of address, and they can register.
They just need to furnish an address, not necessarily a proof of address.
And then, of course, there is a second date that was announced?
The Commission is looking into that matter, and once decisions are taken, appropriate announcements will be made.
So that will be confirmed a little bit later. Now, there were some challenges during the weekend. What were some of those challenges that you faced with some communities?
Look, we've got to place that in its proper context. You're running 22,500 voting stations across the country. You have difficulties at no more than 20 voting stations. So that tells us that the operation was a resounding success. However, communities are raising particular issues, and as a commission, we want to engage with those communities so that they can open up the process for those who want to register to do so, and by so doing to express their political rights. We had a bit of a situation in Vuwani, as you all know. Denver hostel, especially on Saturday, some areas in the south of Johannesburg, and Ward 95 in eThekwini municipality. So what does that mean? It means that we need to engage with the community leadership. We need to engage with government to try to find solutions to the issues that have been raised by those communities. Our preference is not a security situation. Our preference is for a political resolution of matters that have been raised by the community.
Now, can these issues, which relates to service delivery and the demarcation of some districts, can these issues be solved before the next registration date or even the municipal elections?
It is our sincere hope that with the right energy, with the right attitude in those engagements, a solution would be possible.
Because these are really serious issues beyond your control as the IEC. You need to work with other bodies to make this work.
Indeed, they are outside of the statutory scope of the IEC, but we need those state agencies who have a primary mandate to deal with those issues, to lead those discussions. And of course, as always, the Electoral Commission will be available to support the process.
Now, the SMS line as well as the toll-free number, are those still available for people that want to know more about registration during the course of this period before the run-up to the elections?
Yes, the call center is functional, as is the 32810 number. The call center number is 0800 11 8000. Even for those people who registered over the weekend, you can use those facilities to confirm that your registration was indeed effected.
And the SMS number
32810.
And they have to send then the SMS, the ID numbers to that particular number, and they can get confirmation.
Indeed.
Mr. Mambola, good luck to you in the run-up to the municipal elections, and we will be speaking to you again and keep us updated in terms of the resolutions and some of the stuff that will come out of the negotiations with the troubled communities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was Mr. Simon Mabolo, the IEC Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, here in studio with us, chatting to us about that. But Kendall Makamata is standing by with your sports news.
Discussion you've just had. Good morning to you. This is the sports for you, and topping our stories for this morning, Fiji have lifted the Las Vegas Sevens World Series title, taking a lead in the World Series as they came from 15-0 down to beat Australia by 6 points in the Cup final. Now Australia eventually went down 21-15 to Fiji.
We've come to see from Fiji.
They went down to Fiji 21-15, who now top the World Series standings outright with 91 points after their second tournament win of the season. They travel to Vancouver full of confidence for the next tournament, which begins this coming Friday. South Africa are second on 86 points after their victory over USA in the third-place playoff, while plate winners New Zealand will head to Vancouver in third on 82 points. The Blitzboks went down 12-14 to Australia in the semi-finals after 2 penalty tries for the Australians through. And the third-place match against the host, the Blitzboks scored 3 tries, with Branko du Preez getting 1 and making 3 conversions.
Hoping to convert his own try. That whizzes through, and that is going to be that.
That was that. Now Australia beat South Africa by 5 wickets in the second T20 International at the Wanderers in Joburg to level the 3-match series at 1 game apiece. David Warner and Glenn Maxwell delivered the victory to the Aussies with the bat. The series will now be decided in Cape Town this coming Wednesday.
South Africa looked much more fluent in the batting department than the opening match of the series in Durban. Proteas skipper Faf du Plessis led the Proteas effort after losing the toss and being invited to bat. Opener Quinton de Kock, with his 44 runs from just 28 deliveries, set the platform up front as he shared a 62-run second-wicket stand with his captain. The informed David Miller's explosive 33 from just 18 deliveries gave their innings some impetus in the middle overs. But it was du Plessis who wielded the willow for the home side. He brought up his 7th T20 50, clubbing 79 runs from just 41 deliveries to lift the Proteas total to a somewhat imposing but not impossible 204 for 7 in their 20 overs. Seamers Kagiso Rabada and Dale Steyn, making his return after a lengthy injury layoff, ensured that the home side got off to a near-flawless start. The pair reduced the tourists to 36 for 3 inside the first 6 overs. But all that graft was undone by the absolute carnage caused by David Warner and Glenn Maxwell. The pair both notched up half-centuries as they dispatched the Proteas attack to all parts of the bullring in their record 161-run stand. Maxwell was eventually dismissed for 75 and Warner for 77, but it was too little too late as the Aussies needed just 11 runs from the final over. It did come down to the very final delivery of the match, but Mitchell Marsh scored the winning runs, handing Australia a 5-wicket win. Earlier, South Africa's women's team suffered an embarrassing 45-run defeat to the West Indies. Seamer Shabnam Ismail took 3 for 25 to help restrict the visitors to 143 for 6 in their 20 overs. But the Proteas' reply was a dismal failure. Only 3 batters managed to eke out double figures as they were bundled out for a paltry 98 inside their 20 overs, gifting the West Indies a comprehensive victory and allowing them to level the 3-match series at 1 game apiece.
I think our bowling was pretty well. We hit our lines and lengths that we wanted to, maybe 1 or 2 overs that didn't go away. But with the batting, our execution has just been poor. I think the main thing is that's 1 game of cricket. Like, you know, anything can happen with T20 cricket. It's such a fast-moving game. At the end of it, you have to back yourself. No fear of failure. I think that's one of the areas where we have to batters need to back themselves and don't be indecisive when you're in the middle.
Their final match and the series decider is in Newlands on Wednesday. Samantha Mari, SABC News.
And so let's have a quick look at what you've got to say on social media, because I'll tell you what, that last T20 between Australia and South Africa is going to be a humdinger. First up, Richard Robinson says, well played to both teams. Good to watch Australia win in a dramatic game. Well played. Looking forward to a great final, which is exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be an awesome finale there. And Ashfi Afiat says, outstanding batting, Maxi. What a win. Totally thrilling match. Congrats, South Africa versus Australia, second T20. And then Snetino reckons our coach Domingos to be blamed for our loss after the first ball. Rabada bowled, then told him how to bowl. Are you sure that's the message that he got from the dugout? That's speculation. So anyway, you're allowed to say what you think, and and there you go. The picture of the day, pretty much showing the South African flags flying high at the Wanderers during that match. What a beautiful match it was. We're hoping for the same out in Cape Town. Now, this past weekend was one of the busiest in the sporting front, from the upsets in the first round of the Nedbank Cup to the Proteas narrowly losing to Australia in the second T20. Now, this happened at the Wanderers in Johannesburg. However, the highlight of the weekend should be the Orlando Pirates win against their bitter rivals Kaizer Chiefs, courtesy of the Zimbabwean striker Tendai Ndoro's two beautiful goals. Let's now take a look at how the goal that broke the deadlock on the way to Orlando Pirates knocking Kaizer Chiefs out went.
They got the clinical touch away, through a ball onside. Ndoro gets his third start, and in his first cup appearance this season gives Orlando Pirates the lead in the last 15 minutes of regulation time. The Zimbabwean striker said if he got his chance he would take it, and he's delivered on that promise this afternoon. Pirates crowd sent into raptures as F&B comes to his feet. Is there a victory over Chiefs again this season for the Buccaneers?
Well, there you go. I know the Buccaneers are celebrating all the way through to next week. Now, here's some results quickly from the weekend Super Rugby. As you know, there was Super Rugby action on the go as well. Friday through to Saturday. Fridays was the Crusaders beating the Blues 28-13 in Christchurch. Then the Brumbies are staying top of the Australian Conference. They beat the Waratahs 32-15. The rest of the matches were played on Saturday morning through to Saturday evening. Chiefs are losing to the Lions. The Lions getting an historic win out in Hamilton, beating the Chiefs for the first time out there. 36-32. Well done and congratulations to you. 17-16 was a score between the replay of last year's final. The Highlanders beating the Hurricanes 17-16. Then the Reds against the Force 22-6. And then we had the Bulls beating the Rebels 45-25. And then Cheetahs 10-20 they lose to the Stormers in Bloemfontein. And the Jaguars of Argentina in Durban, they seem to be ill-disciplined. Once again, getting 2 yellow cards. This time they lose 19-15 to the Sharks. Have a quick look at the logs. And starting with a combined South African log, you'll see that the Sharks, the South African Group 2 leader, they're sitting on 9 points with a single bonus point. The Stormers, the South African Group 1 leader rather, they are sitting on 9 points, and a single bonus point is a points differential that distinguishes the two. Then followed by the Lions, Jaguars, Bulls, Cheetahs, Sunwolves, and Kings, the last two not playing this last weekend. Go through to the Australasian combined log, and there you'll see quite pretty much the same as it was last time, where the Australasian combined group, you'll see topping it would be the Crusaders. When it does come up, we'll be able to show it to you. There we go. Brumbies, they're sitting on 9 points. The Australian Conference leaders on a single bonus point. Have a look at their point differential. 59 points ahead of the next placed team, Crusaders, on 5 points. Followed through by the Force, Waratahs, Chiefs, Highlanders, Blues, Rebels, Hurricanes, and Reds. And that's where we leave it with the sports for now. Evan Janssen is standing by. Do not go anywhere.
Children's rights and health are a priority in the journey of good health.
All children should have access to adequate health care, not only curative but preventative as well.
How to identify ADHD on children.
ADHD is a
childhood disorder, which manifests with the symptoms of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and or inattention.
Is breastfeeding still a vital nutrition to babies even today?
Breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life is absolutely crucial.
Catch Health Talk with Dr. Sello Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10 a.m.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom now. Every year, Israeli Apartheid Week takes place across more than 150 cities and universities. It aims to raise awareness about Israel's apartheid policies and conflict with the Palestinian people. Panel discussions, film screenings and creative movements take place throughout the week in support for the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. Now joining us in studio today is the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, South Africa's Dr. Uri Davis. A very good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you too.
We're in the 12th year here in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken.
Pardon?
We're in the 12th year, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us about the successes you think of the BDS campaign that you've had, and also then maybe this year, what do you think is going to be different from this year's Israeli Apartheid Week?
Well, I'm a visitor in South Africa. I'm one of the main speakers on this week. And I believe that before I progress any further, I ought to share with our audience my understanding of the key term of the situation, that is apartheid. I understand apartheid not to be quite different from popular racism and xenophobia. I think the Israeli embassy is quite right when it says that in Israel proper, popular racism and xenophobia is not qualitatively different relative to what obtains in other member states of the United Nations organization. But that's not quite apartheid. Apartheid is a political system that legislates racialist values through acts of parliament and applies this legislation through the law enforcement instruments of the state, the police, the courts, the prisons, the army. And in this regard, understood in these terms, Israel is an apartheid state identical to that of former apartheid in South Africa, legislating through acts of parliament segregation where it matters most. And where it matters most, Israel is a settler colonial state. Former South Africa was a settler colonial state. The critical issue is the question of control of soil and subsoil. 93% in Israel proper, pre-1967 Israel, 93% in Israel proper. In law is legislated for Jews only. 87% in apartheid South Africa was in law legislated for whites only. The apartheid divide in South Africa being between whites and non-whites in law. The apartheid divide in Palestine and the sovereignty of apartheid Israel is between Jew and non-Jew in law, not between Jew and Arab, between Jew and non-Jew.
Now, you're here this week, of course, to show your support to the BDS campaign. Tell us about your book, Apartheid Israel, and then what do you hope to achieve here this week?
Well, happily, South Africa is governed since 1994 or 1996 by a democratic constitution that is a beacon of liberal democratic constitutions worldwide. And it is informed by the values of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What I would like to achieve through my visit and my interventions at your studio and elsewhere is make a contribution to the declaring of organizations whose fundamental basic values, bylaws and constitutions are not compatible with the values of South African constitution, declaring such organizations as illegal under South African constitution. First and foremost, the Jewish National Fund. So I also believe that I happen to be the first academic publishing in English and primarily in the English-speaking world to have introduced the term of apartheid, as I defined it initially in our conversation, into the Palestine solidarity narrative and the academic narrative. My first publication was out in the market in 1987, if I'm not mistaken. It took 30 years for the term to be integrated into the narrative and become a cornerstone of understanding, analysis and discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I believe that is a worthwhile achievement. I hope to enhance that achievement, and as I said, focus initially on the Jewish National Fund, and if you give me another 2 minutes, I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
The settler colonial Zionist invasion of Palestine resulted in a crime against humanity known as the ethnic cleansing of any given territory. It was perpetrated in other third world territories throughout by many settler colonial invasions, including the Zionist settler colonial invasion of Palestine. The State of Israel was established in 1948, and under the cover of the 1948-49 war, massive ethnic cleansing took place where the majority of the indigenous people, the Palestinian Arab people, were expelled from their homeland, from their territory. About 500 or more localities, rural and urban, were ethnically cleansed and eventually leveled down. One of these localities is the Palestinian Arab village of Lubia. The Jewish National Fund had the temerity of veiling the crime against humanity of the Palestinian Arab village of Lubia by planting a forest and developing recreational grounds under the name of South Africa.
Wow, that is incredible.
That's tall.
Yeah, it is. I want to ask you about the similarities between the two, not just in policy, but in the day-to-day lives of Palestinian people, how their lives are affected. What kind of sacrifices do they make? How do they travel, for instance, access and these sorts of things?
Well, the invasion of Palestine took place in two primary stages. It's an ongoing process. I mean, what happens today in southern Palestine, known as the Negev, is incremental expulsion of the communities that survived the massive ethnic cleansing of 1948. They are now progressively evicted from their localities with the aim of concentrating them into enclosures similar to Soweto under apartheid. But there are significant differences between the territories that came under Israeli sovereignty, apartheid Israel sovereignty, consequent to the 1948 war, and the territories known as West Bank, Gaza Strip, and beyond that came under apartheid sovereignty, consequent to the 1967 war. In the latter territories, apartheid is much more visible than in the former territories. There are hundreds of checkposts, not only territories confiscated, but time is confiscated. And not everybody appreciates the significance of temporal confiscation. The land may be settled, may be alienated, may be confiscated, may be made an area for military maneuvers, but the land remains there, and when apartheid collapses, it will return to its legitimate owners, the Palestinian people. If you confiscate time through checkposts, through delays, through restrictions of movement, through endless waits in queues, not just a month, 1 month after another, generation after another, you cannot retrieve time. It goes.
Absolutely.
You will retrieve the land, but you will not retrieve the time lost.
Yes, and time is becoming, I think we as human beings, we start to realize how important the currency of time is.
Especially when we advance in age.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you. Thank you for being with us here this morning. Of course, it is Israeli Apartheid Week, and Dr. Yuri Davis is in South Africa. To talk about the effects of Israeli occupation. His book is called Apartheid Israel. It's something that you should be reading, and you should be following him here in South Africa.
And that's the Arabic edition.
And there's the Arabic version of it. I think you can get it at the Afro-Middle East Center here in South Africa. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And I wish you all the best in South Africa this week.
Thanks.
Now, let's move on quickly and take a look at the front pages from around the African continent. We'll start in Zimbabwe today. The Chronicle reports fired war veterans Minister Christopher Mutsvanga has lost his position as chairperson of the Zimbabwe National Liberation War Veterans Association, as a former freedom fighter cannot be led by someone who's been suspended from the ZANU-PF. This was according to a senior official yesterday. Then we move to Swaziland, where the Observer says there have been 36 reported cases of malaria in the country in the past month alone. Finally, in Nigeria, the Daily Trust reports that the Minister of State for Labour and Employment, Mr. James Ocholi, his wife and son died in a horrific road accident yesterday. Now, to continue our discussion on Israeli Apartheid Week, activists across the world are gearing up for protests and discussion for the next 7 days. South Africa today launches its 12th annual Israel Apartheid Week. But what does this mean in the bigger picture now? Joining us in studio is the African Muslim theologian and anti-apartheid activist from the Center for Democracy at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Farid Essek. A very good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning. Good to be with you, Eben.
Nice to have you with us once again. You know, Prof, whatever you write these days flies around the world in 2 seconds, as they say. I've been following your utterings on social media the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. They've been very passionate around the issues of Israel and Israeli apartheid and so forth. Can you take us through the thought process? What has stirred the passions in you over the last couple of weeks?
First of all, passion isn't generally in liberal discourse. Passion isn't seen as a good quality for academics to be having. Academics can have passion in bed. They can't have passion in public. I don't go along with that discourse. I think that in the last few weeks we have seen an escalation of how seriously the Israeli government is taking the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. They have invested millions of dollars into this, into funding trips of many people, including South Africans, to Israel to go and show their side of the story. In fact, Eben, I suspect that the SABC will be inundated after Professor Yuri Davis, who is Jewish, by the way, and Israeli, after his interview, why are you not telling the other side of the story? And so the dominant narrative, of course, is the Israeli narrative. The cry for the other side of the story, when one goes to Palestine, it is really when domestic abuse is the common problem, then a man comes along and says, but look, you're not talking about the rights of men.
Yeah.
The man also has his side. Yes, of course, but the overwhelming problem is, and so I've always, from my days of the struggle against racism, to my days of the struggle against apartheid, to my struggle as a commissioner for gender equality, to my work as an AIDS activist, I've always struggled to see the world from the underside of history. What is being hidden from the dominant discourse?
Yeah.
And the dominant discourse in the world today is of the Jewish people as a persecuted people.
Yeah.
That indeed has for a long time been true. I don't think that our anger at the occupation of Palestine must ever diminish our revulsion at this huge crime that was committed against the Jewish people. But I'm sorry, you cannot use your victimhood against another people. The fact that you were abused when you were a child does not enable you to use that as an excuse to abuse another person. When I confront you with your current abuse, please don't throw your history of being abused at me. I am interested in your current victim, and I am interested in what you are currently doing. You do need to go and see a shrink. I understand that.
Yeah.
But that's not the point at the moment. The point is the dispossession and the occupation of other people of the land that they have also occupied for thousands of years.
You talk about it almost as in an individual aspect. Is it a case of the abused becoming a classic, the abused becoming the abuser? And is what is happening now comparable with what happened during the Holocaust, as it's known?
No. I don't think that the scale of the atrocities against the Palestinians committed by the Israelis, that is nearly on the scale of the Nazi Holocaust. I think that there are elements that are present, ethnic cleansing, the desire to remove a people, the whole idea that other people are inherently dirty, that they sully the land, the intention to create a future by building walls, by bracketing yourself off completely from other people. Well, I think that there are elements of that present. And yes, it is true. If your abuse is not dealt with and worked through properly, inevitably that repeats itself. It doesn't always have to be the case. South Africa has been an example where black people in South Africa have not felt the need to wreak upon others what was wreaked upon ourselves.
Yeah.
But very many a times, when you don't work through your victimhood, you see the problem with the slogan that emerged from the Holocaust, never again. It really means never again to us.
Yeah.
When you are part of a broader humanity, never again should mean never again to everybody. And so the whole logic that you can actually build your security on the insecurity of another people, this is at the heart of what's underpinning this ethno-genocide that is taking in Palestine, systematically, very slow and long, drawn out, not nearly as dramatic on the scale of the Holocaust.
Now, Professor, we're talking about Israeli apartheid versus South African apartheid. Of some of the stuff that I read that you wrote, you made an analogy. You said that you believe that Israel apartheid, in many ways, is much worse than apartheid were in South Africa. Is it fair to make a comparison? And if you can maybe qualify it, why would you say that it'd be worse?
First of all, the South African people have never demanded that the word apartheid only belongs to them. I have written about gender apartheid in the Arab countries. So apartheid doesn't have to exist only in the South African form. Yuri Davis has dealt adequately with how else it could be. But when you look, every single veteran of our country's liberation struggle, every single one of them that have been there have come back and they've said this. Here on the map, we see what Palestine looked like originally.
Yes.
In the second map, we see the United Nations partition.
Yeah.
The last map is the dramatic story of where we are at the moment.
What is left, yes.
What is left. And that really makes the South African homeland system looks glorious.
Yeah.
The South African homeland system, except for Botswana, the areas largely fitted in with each other. The green, what we see in the 2014 map, that is what Palestine looks like at the moment. So no person in the weirdest imaginations can possibly think that that can constitute a country. Then you have a whole range of other things. The legalization of torture under law.
Yeah.
The whole idea of collective punishment. The furthest that we in South Africa got with collective punishment was with the Uppington 14, when a whole group of people were charged with murder because they were all part of the same mob. In Palestine, if you're an activist, your home gets bulldozed. You're on trial. You haven't even been charged. Your home gets bulldozed. Your family land gets bulldozed. Your whole family and tribe is held culpable for it. So in many ways, What the Palestinians are experiencing, as people like myself, people like Khalema Motlanthe, people like Bladen Zimande, people like Baleka Mbete, a whole range, people like Ronnie Casserols, people like Terrell Kota before he got co-opted by the other side, a whole range of politicians who've been there have come and said that life under Zionism or in the shadow of Zionism is infinitely worse than what life under apartheid had been for us as black people.
Tell us about the BDS campaign, boycott, divestment sanctions, disinvestment sanctions. Is this the strongest tool against this kind of apartheid, as you call? And do you think that this BDS campaign is capable of increasing in strength and volume in the months and years to come to really make a difference?
Well, the Israeli government, more specifically Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he has made it clear that the BDS campaign is the single largest threat to Israel itself, and he said bigger than the security and bigger than the military threat. The BDS campaign has only been 12 years. Now, of course, in the case of South Africa, we had the armed struggle, we had the internal movement, and then, of course, we also had our campaign of BDS against South Africa. The BDS campaign against Israel is only 12 years old. It has notched up enormous victories throughout the world. The fact that the Israeli government has invested more than 250 million just last year allocated this amount of money to fighting the BDS campaign internationally, training people. All of this is an indication of the success of the BDS campaign. It has become a central issue in the United States elections. Various United States state legislatures are running helter-skelter trying to counter the BDS movement. The one challenge that the BDS movement has is that for every success of ours, we are increasing the amount of work that we do. Because the Israelis and their lobbies in South Africa, and that is really what they are, often masquerading as indigenous South African communities. There is an indigenous South African Jewish community, but very many of those Jews don't support the Zionist narrative. Unfortunately, some of those entities dominate the narrative where you say only the Archbishop speaks for the church. The pro-abortionists, the pro-women, Catholics and so on, they don't have a role in the church. And that's how the dynamic inside the Jewish community also works. Only the Jewish Board of Deputies speaks, nobody else speaks. But all of us know, like in the church, like in the Muslim community, there are significant other voices. Today we had an Israeli Beirut Nodi in front of us. We had an Israeli Joe Slovo in front of us. An Afrikaner, from the heart of Afrikanerdom, there were these Afrikaners who stood up. And so from the heart of Judaism, you have many, many Jews who are standing up and speaking truth to power today.
Prof, you've got 1 minute to tell us the way forward, the solution. How do we stop women and children from dying?
You stop women and children from dying by putting an end to all war, by putting an end to all war throughout the world. But it's not just war. The occupation, the dehumanization of people, the dispossession of people, all of this takes its toll on people. A sensible alternative to all of this, if you want to stop this, is a simple, non-violent way of resistance, the Gandhi way for that matter. And that is divest from those that are guilty of this, take sanctions against them, raise your voice against them, and at the very least, don't become complicit in that. You're not a Palestinian, you're not there, you can't fight there, but how do you engage in your own peaceful way, and which in the case of many South Africans, certainly everybody abroad who did not always support the armed struggle against the apartheid regime, they decided boycotting outspan oranges, boycotting citrus fruits, boycotting South African wine. This was the way that and this is the way that we think the international community should be participating in this non-violent movement against the dispossession of the Palestinian people of their land.
Prof, thank you very much for joining us. We've run out of time. Professor Farid Essek, well, He is a Muslim theologian and anti-apartheid activist from the Center for Democracy at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you for joining us. Of course, our discussion today is Israeli Apartheid Week. It kicks off today. It carries on for most of the rest of the week. We'll be back at the top of the hour with another complete news update. So don't go away. See you then.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
A romantic adventure film starring Ivan Botha and Donnelly Roberts. The story begins in the beautiful vineyards of Paarl in the Western Cape. The adventure takes off when the characters find themselves on the tropical island of Love, Mauritius.
Josephine's work is more interesting and distinguishable. She visits war-stricken zone countries to tell the story of the damage war often leaves behind.
This particular exhibition's case, places that are named after conflict or disaster or war or reconciliation.
And basically what it is it's a collection of the best animated short films from around the world this year. And the idea is to inspire animators and directors with this exciting content. And so that's been offered to us as a cinema, and we're very excited to be screening the animated show of shows here in South Africa.
Join Refulo Mulwa for that 1-hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Vera Ephraim defied family and traditions to follow her dream.
Decided that I'm going to prove to them that they were wrong.
The first breakthrough came in when she was studying and touring in Europe.
That was my first breakthrough.
Generations was her first television debut in South Africa.
It was my first gig. I was very excited. I was very happy. I said, yeah, this is confirmation I'm at the right place.
After pain, rejection and suffering, her dream became a reality.
I followed my path, and I'm happy and grateful and blessed.
Join your host, Wileng Mulabati, on Wupilong every Friday at 17:30.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time. It is Monday, the 7th of March, 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. As you know, we're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show now available on our YouTube channel. Question of the day we pose to you. It's all about energy and the energy mix that we need in this country. What is the right energy mix for South Africa? You can let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, on our Facebook page, and we'll read your comments a little bit later. But right now, let's take a look at your headlines. President Jacob Zuma is set to start a 2-day state visit to Nigeria. The Independent Electoral Commission is tallying up the numbers following the first voters' registration weekend ahead of the local government elections. And several high-profile U.S. politicians react to the death of the former First Lady Nancy Reagan upon hearing the news. of her passing. Those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning, Kendall.
Elvis, good morning. It's been a massive weekend, and as a result, it's a massive Monday morning. Good morning to you all. This is what we've got coming up in the sports data today.
They're giving them the try. They're going to come back for the second. There's a fumble. That's the game.
The Proteas lose the second T20 against Australia on the last ball in a thrilling match at the Wanderers.
That's the goal line there. Here we go now with the kind of rugby we've come to see from Fiji.
Fiji surge into the lead as they win the Las Vegas Sevens, beating Australia 21-15 in the Cup final. The Nedbank Cup did not fail to entertain as Baroka FC caused the upset of the weekend, beating Chipa United 3-2. And that's where I'm going to leave it for now. Just a sneak peek of what we've got in the sports. I'll also be chatting to Bruce Davidson about the Davis Cup team South Africa that beat Luxembourg over the weekend.
Sounds fantastic. That's all coming up with Kendall in a short while. Top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma starts a two-day state visit to Nigeria tomorrow. Relations with the West African powerhouse have been uneasy over the past few years, and President Zuma will be looking to improve political and economic ties.
South Africa and Nigeria are undoubtedly the continent's economic leaders, but it's no secret that neither country is in good shape. Oil is Nigeria's main export, and the plunge in prices has affected their country's revenue. South Africa, on the other hand, is battling slow growth and unemployment. While companies like MTN and MultiChoice have invested in Nigeria, they have found themselves at odds with Nigerian regulators, a topic also likely to come up during the visit. But Nigerians say they welcome South Africa's investments.
The environment is very conducive for South Africans to come here and then invest in Nigeria, where the labor is very cheap, and the government is very willing to assist South African investors to come to Nigeria.
More than 120 South African companies operate in Nigeria in various sectors, including telecommunications, banking, retail and aviation. The visit by President Jacob Zuma to Nigeria has been described by some analysts as a chance for the two giants to reset their relations. This in a bid to reaffirm their position as Africa's political and economic powerhouses. Nzwandi Lembech, SABC News, Abuja, Nigeria.
The IEC Chief Electoral Officer, Masoto Moyepua, says that they will release the final figures of first voter registration weekend tomorrow. Earlier, the IEC advised those who missed out to register to go to their municipal electoral offices during weekdays during office hours to check. Alternatively, you can wait until the next registration weekend, which is planned for April the 9th and 10th. It's not confirmed as yet, and we'll get an update from them. Now, the IEC says that at least 1 million South Africans visited the registration stations to check their details of their voting districts or to register this past weekend. The IEC says fewer than 20 voting stations out of more than 22,000 reported problems. There were disruptions in Vuwani in Limpopo, where the residents are resisting a planned municipal demarcation. Meanwhile, 4 suspects are expected to appear in court after they stormed the IEC centres in Pompierstad in the Northern Cape and damaged the IEC material at the weekend. They were taking part in a community protest that targeted the IEC's voter registration process. Now, the African National Congress Treasurer General Zweli Mkhize has warned that no person will become a party candidate in the upcoming municipal elections unless endorsed by the community. Mkhize was speaking during the party's campaign in Mpompeni near Howick to encourage people to register for the local government elections. He says allowing communities to participate in the ANC candidate selection process will help reduce complaints that some councillors do not account to their communities. Investigations are underway following the death of 10 people in a bus crash on the R528 George Valley Road outside Heinsberg in Limpopo yesterday. The bus was carrying 61 ZCC church members from Oria to Phalaborwa. The other 51 passengers all suffered injuries. The bus driver appeared to lose control of the vehicle before it overturned. The deceased were 4 men, 4 women and 2 children. The injured were taken to the Van Velden and Letaba hospitals. The Mineral Resources Department says that alternative ways are being considered to reach the container in which 3 mine workers are trapped underground at the Lily Gold Mine near Barberton in Mpumalanga. The department says that the Minister, Mosebenzi Zwane, returned to the mine yesterday to receive an update on the rescue efforts. He was told that the team of experts is now considering other alternatives to reach the container underground. The situation was earlier declared unsafe for the rescue operations to resume as a result of new rock falls. Yvonne Mnisi, Preti Mabuza and Solomon Nyarende were trapped underground when the lamp room container they were working in fell into a sinkhole just over a month ago. 3 farmers from Parys in the Free State are expected to appear in the town's magistrate's court later today on charges relating to the murder of 2 men in January this year. The 2 men died in hospital after they were allegedly severely beaten up by a group of at least 40 farmers. The Hawks have so far arrested 7 suspects for the alleged murder. It is alleged that the 2 men assaulted and tried to rob one of the farmers at his farm before fleeing and being caught by the mob of angry farmers. But the deceased family members deny that they were criminals, saying they went there to allegedly ask for their wages. Further afield now, Benin has begun counting votes after an election to choose a successor to the President Thomas Boni Yayi, who is stepping down as the leader of the West African nation after 2 terms. Leading the field of 33 candidates going into the election was the Prime Minister, Lionel Zinso, a former economist and investment banker backed by both Boni Yayi and the main opposition Democratic Renewal Party. Provincial results show that Zinso will probably advance to a runoff election where he will face prominent businessman Patrice Talon. By relinquishing power as mandated by law, Boni Yayi stands out from leaders in countries such as Burundi, Rwanda and the Congo Republic who have circumvented limits on their time in office. Now, several high-profile U.S. politicians reacted to the death of the former First Lady Nancy Reagan via Twitter upon hearing the news of her death. Nancy Reagan, the former actress who was fiercely protective of her husband Ronald Reagan through a Hollywood career, 8 years in the White House and an assassination attempt, and her husband's Alzheimer's disease, died aged 94.
Drugs take away the dream from every child's heart and replace it with a nightmare.
Former First Lady Nancy Reagan has died. The Reagan Library said she died of congestive heart failure at her Los Angeles home on Sunday. The former First Lady saw the late U.S. President Ronald Reagan, who died in 2004, through 8 years in the White House, years that included an assassination attempt and later Alzheimer's disease. An actress by trade, Reagan went on to become one of the most influential First Ladies in U.S. history. She will be buried next to her late husband at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. Reagan was 94 years old.
A romantic adventure film starring Ivan Buerta and Donnelly Roberts. The story begins in the beautiful vineyards of Paarl in the Western Cape. The adventure takes off when the characters find themselves on the tropical island of Love, Mauritius.
Dr. Safi's work is more interesting and distinguishable. She visits war-stricken zone countries to tell the story of the damage war often leaves behind.
In this particular exhibition's case, places that are named after conflict or disaster or war or reconciliation.
And basically what it is it's a collection of the best animated short films from around the world this year. And the idea is to inspire animators and directors with this exciting content. And so that's been offered to us as a cinema, and we're very excited to be screening the animated show of shows here in South Africa.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Hello again. Time for us to shift the focus here on Newsroom. We're going to go around the country, a bit more of a regional focus with the news. Now, the 20th edition of the South African National Science Festival is underway right now in Grahamstown in the Eastern Cape. The public's been exposed to various and interesting exhibitions and lectures, helping them to appreciate science. One of the highlights of this year's festival is an exhibition room set aside for South African innovation. This is where people see that this country too has great scientists and great scientific minds. Now, to get a little bit more on the story, let's cross to Port Elizabeth, where Iviwe Porti is standing by. She's at the festival. Very good morning to you, Iviwe. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben.
Just give us a quick overview, the Science Festival, what the expectations are, and a couple of highlights to look out for this year.
Well, the expectations are that, throughout the whole festival, the festival will be jam-packed. If I can just give you a picture of how much the festival has grown, in light of it celebrating 20 years this year. When it started out in 1996, they only had about 15,000 people coming through to, be part of the festival over the 7-day period where the festival is held in Grahamstown. But now in 2016, they're expecting 55,000 people to have come through over the 7 days where they hold the festival. This year, there are about 650 interactive events that will be happening, and it's not only for the youth or pupils that are in high school and junior schools, but there are lectures as well as adults can come through and speak to the people that are holding the exhibitions. Most of them are professional scientists. Some of them are doing their PhDs. Some of them are part of these experiments, as well as innovations that are happening throughout the country, and not only just South Africa but as well as the world, because you find ambassadors coming from the UN, the US, people that are involved in science and people that love science. So it's a jam-packed festival. People have things to do throughout the day. It starts early in the morning at 8 o'clock and it ends at about 5 o'clock if there isn't an event later on in the afternoon.
Now if you were, the thing that kind of strikes me as an enthusiast is there's a specific exhibition room this year for dealing with South African innovation. Tell us about that, but also tell us what are some of the highlights in South African innovation then there?
Well, there's quite a few, Eben, but for example, when you go through, it's a room filled with things. One of the biggest highlights is a project that South Africa is currently working on with different countries, of course, which is the SKA project, the Square Kilometre Array project, which will allow scientists with the proper equipment to look back into time. When we spoke to the minister, Naledi Pandor, the Minister of Science and Technology, she said these scientists will be able to look back into time for about more than 200 years and maybe find a way to actually look look forward into time. This will not only, help them understand how the world evolves, but as well as the human nature, humankind, and, the difficulties that we face that they are unable to answer with science just as yet. Another project that is very interesting that South Africa is part of, that is original to South Africa, has been built by South African technologists as well as scientists, is the Meerkat, which is a big radio telescope that also works, in terms of reading the signs, the sun, the different planets, how the different planets work with Earth, and, should we actually be looking into finding life or how we could actually live in a different planet. One of the scientists that we actually spoke to mentioned how we will still have the sun for another 400,000 years. So those are the type of things that come through also just through South Africa, because that's a South African project. Something as simple as the creepy crawly in a pool is a South African innovation as well.
The creepy crawly is South African innovation. Wonderful. If that is our only contribution, if we were to the wider world, then I'm worried. Anyhow, on a more serious note, the Science Minister, Naledi Pandor, she spoke on Friday, I think, at the festival. Just to give us a quick overview, what did she say?
Well, when she spoke on Friday, she reiterated the importance of having festivals such as these, educational festivals, that will impact and also motivate pupils to take science and technology. As you'll remember, Eben, that we do have a shortage of professionals in those fields, professionals that specialize in different various aspects of the science field and technology field. So she spoke about how, these children have come through the science festival. They are able to ask questions at a face-to-face, personal perspective, be part of experiments, which is really fun for them. But they were able to see how science happens day to day, that they can actually do science within their homes, at school. And science and mathematics are not very difficult. It's just that from a young age, it's important for people to understand science and mathematics so that they can carry on with it throughout high school and not just run away or walk away from science and mathematics. But here, when they come to the science festival, they are able to see what exactly, they've been taught from a textbook. As you will remember that many maybe might have a fully equipped science lab, but when you come through to the science festival, you are exposed to everything.
When does the festival finish up, and what's been the interaction like with the local community there?
The festival finishes up tomorrow. The local community that have come through, predominantly most of them are the different schools throughout the Eastern Cape. But a lot of people, are happy to see the Science Festival actually growing. They have a lot to do throughout the day. I know some of the children were involved, in creating their own rocket or being given, a problem and then find a solution themselves. The teachers are also very interactive and involved. They come to the lectures. The pupils not only, are part of the experiments, but they come to the different lectures. One of the lectures was science made simple. So it was simple experiments in terms of, how do you maybe blow up a balloon? What is the science behind that? What is the science behind cricket? What is the science behind, the power of batting in cricket? So it's simple things, but the community has been very interactive. People have really come out in their numbers.
And the future of the Science Festival, you'd say the future is bright and we'll see it grow from strength to strength in Grahamstown?
Well, from the team, the SciFest team, as well as the Minister's Department, they work very well, they said, hand in hand together. And they are attracting, as they get different projects, they attract different countries. For example, with the Square Kilometre Array project, they're working with different countries. When we were there on Friday night, the official launch, there was the UN was there, the US was also there. So they're looking to grow it further and maybe hold it over a longer period, because the more events that come through, they won't be able to have, this year there's 650 events throughout the 8 days. So the more events and the more science people they have that come through and the more projects and innovations that happen throughout the years, they'll have to grow the festival a bit bigger.
Iviwe, thank you very much for that wrap. That's Iviwe Porty coming to you live from Grahamstown, where the 20th edition of the National Science Festival is taking place. It's quite a hit with the young people there. And yes, South Africa have a lot to offer in the world of science. Now, as part of our regional focus, we're going to look back to, the voter registration weekend. One of the troubled spots, or the most troubled spot this weekend, was the Kapok, informal settlement near Ennerdale in the south of Johannesburg.
These residents say they've lived in squalor without basics and have no interest in registering to vote.
We don't have anything, not even toilets.
We've not seen the councillor for 3 years. Only yesterday, she came drunk.
IEC officials came under attack and no voter registration was allowed to go ahead. Police had their hands full, but their calls fell on deaf ears. Among their concerns, a lack of housing.
Let my people go!
But when a member of the mayoral committee for housing arrived to intervene, it was clear he was not welcome.
Well, it seems unlikely that there will be a second chance for voter registration in areas affected by disruptions and violence, while the IEC says no decision has been made as yet to repeat the process. The IEC says disruptions affected 20 stations, but it also condemned acts of intimidation.
It becomes a problem where persons who would ordinarily want to register are stopped from registering because persons wish to express their disquiet in a manner that stops or violates the rights of others.
At some stations, IEC officials were forced to leave the area before the 5 p.m. cut-off time. Griselda Lewis, SABC News, at the Kapok informal settlement in Ennerdale.
Well, that wraps our regional look at the news here on Newsroom. It's Monday morning, 25 after 11. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have a comprehensive sports roundup. It's been a busy sporting weekend. Some of the results, unfortunately, not so good for South African teams. After a short break with Kendall Makamate. Don't go away.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Health Talk looks into the increase of suicide and symptoms leading to suicide.
The death wish grows when you go into depression after a lot of stress.
And often when we talk about suicide, we don't talk about a person wanting to stop living, but rather wanting to stop living in pain.
After losing everything in life that lead you to no options but suicide.
I had that spirit of fear in me to say, don't even face tomorrow.
After being overwhelmed with stress and trauma, it becomes difficult to have self-control.
People learning tools and skills that will practically enable them to meet these challenges.
In trying times, never be alone. Reach out for help to a better solution.
Support should be done by a counsellor or psychologist where you're able to speak about how you're feeling in a safe, accepting, non-judgmental space.
For all your health tips, join Dr. Silo Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10.
Welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat and I've got your sports on Newsroom, time being 27 past 11. Top story for this bulletin. South Africa made a clean sweep of its tie against Luxembourg at the weekend. Now, we'll be chatting about that in a little while because the big story for this morning is how Russia continues to violate anti-doping rules. This despite its suspension from international track and field, as well as orders from World Athletics governing body, the IAAF, to eradicate cheating. This is according to Germany's broadcaster, which has reported that the coaches that have been suspended in the worst corruption and doping scandal to hit the IAAF are still working in the sport, while others continue to provide banned substances to athletes. One of the suspended coaches who appeared in the ARD documentary has described the accusation as an absolute load of rubbish. He says the accusations are intended to make sure that Olympic superpower Russia is not allowed to compete in the Rio Olympics, which begin in August. Now, Russia was suspended from athletics in November after a special commission of the World Anti-Doping Agency exposed widespread state-sponsored cheating and corruption. It would be allowed to compete in Rio only if it convinced investigators that it had met clearly defined standards. Now, going on to other sporting news, South Africa did make a clean sweep of its tie against Luxembourg, this at the Irene Country Club in Centurion over the weekend. The 5-0 win has got them through to the next round, where they'll meet Eastern Europeans Lithuania, who beat Norway 3-2. Joining me is Bruce Davidson, tennis analyst and promoter. Good morning, Bruce, and thank you for coming through.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bruce, you were there for the entire weekend, and I'm sure, no surprise, because you're like intricately involved with tennis in South Africa. What are your overall feelings about this momentous weekend for South African tennis?
I think it was a fantastic weekend, not only for South African tennis, but for South African sport. First of all, Marcus Undriska, our new captain, went out as a debutant captain, and I think to win 5-0 at home as a new captain was a remarkable achievement. What we did find out was that Marcus Undriska is a very popular captain amongst the players. He managed to settle them in nicely. There was a lot of fun on and off the court, and I think he's set a really nice foundation for the future of Davis Cup in our country. Secondly, the players that played at TAI, namely Tucker Forster, Lloyd Harris, Dean O'Brien and Ruan Rulofse, played an incredibly strong Davis Cup tie in very difficult conditions. It was very hot out there. On-court temperatures were averaging between 44 degrees and 53 degrees, and they didn't lose a set in all the 5 rubbers played, which was a remarkable effort by them. Yes, they didn't have the toughest of opponents, but you know, that's a challenge in itself, because when you go onto a court and you play against someone that might be a little bit weaker than you, you tend to maybe relax, maybe let them in the back door, and they didn't. They put their foot of authority down from the day one on Friday, and I really, really believe that they proved that they can be a force to reckon with going forward with Marcus as their captain.
What would you say was the team's secret to success this time around? Because it's always been dicey. Going into any tie, South African tennis fans have never been sure of what's going to come out. Even leading up to it, yes, the guys were confident, but we didn't know what's going to be a 3-2, was it going to go through, like, for example, last year's tie against Ireland went down to the wire almost.
Right. Well, I think that one of the key factors was Lloyd Harris. He's our up-and-coming 19-year-old player from Durbanville in Cape Town who's making enormous impacts on the ATP World Tour. He's jumped 1,500 places in the last 9 months. He's sitting at 311, and he was the number 2 in the side behind Tucker Forster, who's a seasoned campaigner and it comes from Pretoria, so that was an advantage for Tucker. But for Lloyd to go out there so composed in his first Davis Cup and play such a solid game, he had everybody talking about him. I think that was one of the keys. The second key is Marcus Undriska said that the players had to be happy. They had to be very happy off the court as well as happy on the court. And he created an incredible environment where the players really, really enjoyed themselves. I dined with them twice, and I just could feel there was an absolute nice camaraderie between them, and I think that was key to the success of this tie.
No, very good. We're hoping that it gets carried through to the next tie, which is against Lithuania in July. What are your thoughts about that particular tie?
It's going to be a tough one. The last time we played Lithuania, we played at the Irene Country Club, and we lost to them very narrowly. They are seated higher than us in the world, and we now have to go to Lithuania and play. They're going to probably choose a slow clay court, which is not to the advantage of the South Africans. However, as Dean O'Brien quite rightly said after the doubles win on Saturday, it's going to be warmer weather, which means that the balls will play a little bit faster and the clay will play a little bit faster, which could work in the favour of South Africa. They are upbeat. They are not worried that they're going to play away in Lithuania. It's always nice to play at home, obviously. And they really feel that they've got a good chance to win that through and go through to a playoff to hopefully get into the to the Euro-Africa Group 1, which is where they want to go.
Which is where, we do want to go, because I did have a chat with Dean O'Brien a couple of days ago, and he said absolutely Group 1 is where the team is trying to get into, and then eventually into the World Group. In terms of the preparation for that particular tie, because they now go their separate ways. It's mid-March. They go their separate ways, and they need to come back together before this Lithuania tie. What are the plans to get that same camaraderie going, the same team spirit going into this tie, and the preparations? What have we got planned in terms of their preparations?
Well, it's a big challenge. Dean O'Brien flew out straight after the tie with Ruan Roloff off to Mexico. Tucker Foster's flying out tonight. He's going to the Far East. So is Lloyd Harris to China. So, yeah, there's going to be a challenge. But Marcus Andriska is on Skype with them. He talks to them on a regular basis. And when it comes to the July tie, which is the 17th to the 19th on that weekend, they'll all most probably already be playing on clay because it tends to be the clay court season. And I think that it'll be to the advantage of the South Africans that they do schedule a few clay court tournaments around that time, which is the plan. Marcus Andriska will bring them in about 10 days beforehand, work with them in Lithuania on the clay. He would love them to come to America and work there, but it doesn't make sense. Rather go and meet 10 days earlier, and I think that they'll peak just in time for that Lithuanian type. But it's not going to be an easy type because Lithuania are tough.
They're a tough team, yeah. We know that. We've seen some of their results in past years.
But the nice thing, again, we have secured our spot in Europe-Africa Group 2. At least Luxembourg now have to play, maybe go down.
We're going to stay in Group 2.
It's good. And I think for this year, if we can maintain that at least, it was one of the main objectives. But we've got a good shot against Lithuania.
No, very good. Bruce, I want to thank you so much for coming through. And congratulations to you and the team, because I know you were intricately involved with them. And well done for flying the South African flag high. It wasn't a great weekend for South African sports. We lost in the sevens, we lost in the T20, but we got a win in the tennis.
Absolutely, and Tennis South Africa and the Irene Country Club, they really just partnered so well in working with the International Tennis Federation and bringing a really good event to South Africa.
Oh, very good. Bruce Davidson, our tennis analyst and promoter, giving us a lowdown on a fantastic weekend for Tennis South Africa. Now, on to other sporting news. The South African Sevens rugby team will have to work hard on its discipline this week after it cost the team dearly in the United States leg of the World Series. The Blitzboks were knocked out of the semi-finals in Las Vegas, losing 14-12 to Australia and finishing third after beating the USA in the bronze medal match.
The Blitzboks beat the USA 21-10 to secure third place, scoring 3 tries in the process.
Brown has Sinatla on the outside. Brown dummies to Sinatla. Now he scoots in there. Hickson goes himself. Sinatla gaps him. And South Africa go further ahead.
But once again, the number of penalties they conceded and cards they picked up overshadowed the result. In the semi-final against Australia, Roscoe Speckman got a red, while Justin Geduld saw yellow against the USA.
Something that we did address this week is the discipline, and unfortunately we couldn't get it right again, and we only got ourselves to blame. I think if we give away 6-7 penalties plus a yellow card in a game, any team can beat you, especially in the knockout stages.
Fiji beat Australia 21-15 in the final and now head the overall standings on 91 points, while the Blitzboks are second on 86. The next leg is this coming weekend in Vancouver, Canada. Harry Olivier, SABC News.
It's been raining goals in the 2016 Nedbank Cup round of 32. 44 goals were scored in 14 matches since Wednesday night. Now, to top it off, 4 upset Premiership teams have been knocked out of the tournament, including Soweto Giants, Kaizer Chiefs.
Off the bench, can he make an impact here? Dancing his way through. A little too congested is that Chiefs 18-yard area. Katsani got the clinical touch away through. Ball onside. Ndoro! Gets his third start, and in his first cup appearance this season gives Orlando Pirates the lead in the last 15 minutes of regulation time. The Zimbabwean striker said if he got his chance he would take it, and he's delivered on that promise this afternoon. Pirates crowd sent into raptures as FNB comes to his feet.
Now, as you all know, and as you can see, this past weekend was one of the busiest on the sporting front. From the upsets in the first round of the Nedbank Cup to the Proteas narrowly losing to Australia in the second T20 International at the Wanderers in Johannesburg. However, the highlight of the weekend should be that Orlando Pirates win against their bitter rivals Kaizer Chiefs, courtesy of the Zimbabwean striker Tendai Ndoro's 2 beautiful goals. Let's now take a look at the goal that opened the way to Orlando Pirates knocking Kaizer Chiefs out.
Defence, off the bench. Can he make an impact here? Dancing his way through. No, a little too congested is that Chiefs 18-yard area. Katsani got the clinical touch away. Through a ball onside. Ndoro! Gets his 3rd start. And in his first cup appearance this season gives Orlando Pirates the lead in the last 15 minutes of regulation time. The Zimbabwean striker said if he got his chance he would take it, and he's delivered on that promise this afternoon. Pirates crowd sent into raptures as FNB comes to his feet.
Now, on a very last story for this segment, soccer lawmakers have approved trialling video technology to help eradicate contentious decisions during games. The use of video technology is aimed at aiding referees during matches, with a 2-year trial run to start no later than the season after next. That's the 2017-2018 season. In the most significant rewriting of the laws of the game for more than 100 years, they also changed the rules on penalty kicks, the so-called triple punishment for denying goal-scoring opportunities and the match kickoff itself. Referees also now have the power to red card players for fighting in the tunnel or on the pitch before a match starts.
For the image of the game and control of the match, if Vieira and Keane have a major punch-up, we don't want them playing in the match. So now we're empowering referees. We have to prevent players from playing in a match if they commit a sending-off offence before the kick-off. But they can be replaced, so both teams would still start 11 against 11. Penalty kick, the illegal feinting by Mr. Messi here, we know is unfair. It's deliberate cheating because they know they're not allowed to stop, send the goalkeeper the wrong way, and then take the kick. At the moment, it's a retake and a yellow card. We feel we don't want this in the game. It will always be an indirect free kick, so they won't get a second chance to score to stop them doing it. To balance that, we know that goalkeepers increasingly don't respect the requirement to stay on their line at a penalty. So we're now saying if a goalkeeper comes off his line early and saves a penalty, as well as the retake, he will receive a yellow card. So we're becoming stronger with the kicker and stronger with the goalkeeper, because these are 2 areas where football tells us we need to get a greater grip.
Before we leave it with the sports, I do know that Elvis Presley is standing by with Dr. Martin to have a chat about some of the big stories that have been hitting social media recently. Elvis?
Thank you, Kendall. It's the last hour of the show. Social commentator Dr. Leonard Martin now joins us to look at the week that passed and some of the major stories that unfolded during the week and how it impacts on society. Doctor, a very warm welcome to you in the last hour.
Thank you very much, Elvis, and thank you to the viewers.
Now, we know it was voter registration this weekend, and it seems that everything went fairly smoothly. 5% of incidences reported. Is this perhaps an indication of what we can expect in the municipal elections coming up later this year?
Well, Elvis, I think it's happening on the backdrop of a very dynamic year thus far, with very critical, unmistakable social issues. So I think we are set for a very, very interesting and perhaps the most important local government election since the onset of our democracy.
Why would you say that?
Well, let us look at the issue of the educational upheavals that have taken place, or upheavals around our educational institutions, higher education. But there are also issues relating to primary school education or high school education. Every year we are getting new groups of youth coming onto the society platform, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And more expectations in terms of fitting into society. They are coming onto the platform of issues of service delivery. So the expectations of new voters have to be taken very serious in terms of this high politicization that has taken place throughout South Africa.
And when we talk about those new voters, we're talking about the youth, and specifically on campus. Now, we have this great campus debate that continues, and questions are now being asked as to whether we have reached that point of no return. Are we there yet?
I think we've got to balance it. We have a ruling or leading ruling party that still sustains enormous legitimacy and can, to a great extent, influence developments at our institutions of higher learning. So the question would have to be a very tenuous yes, that we are at a very critical stage. However, it is also a stage in which great dialogue can take place to actually take transformation in the direction that it should.
Now, the Institute of Race Relations is a very interesting report, a survey that they released last week, which indicates that South Africans, black and white, are not as polarized as we see in the outburst of racial slurs on social media, as well as the black and white clashes at some of the universities. And that particular survey seems a bit controversial. What should we read into surveys like these?
I think, first of all, surveys are actually prepared via certain questions. The question always is, are the questions deep going enough? I'm very familiar with the survey that you are talking about. Of course, most South Africans do not want to be doomsday prophets, particularly in terms of their position in society. So yes, people do not want upheaval in which there will be no winners whatsoever, particularly if we talk about race war, race conflict. There will be no winners. However, I think for the survey to be more enlightening, more pointed questions need to be posed. And I would put a question around whether our survey producers, in fact, have, with great respect to them, a more definite grasp of the depth of issues within South African society.
People don't want upheaval, but they do want transformation.
Absolutely. The majority of South Africans want transformation, and my view is that the questions that are formulated should focus more on the complexities and the desirability for transformation, but also the deep challenges that we are facing as a society.
Now, talking about challenges, a community that does face a lot of challenges, the Koisan community, but on the trail of Queen, and I hope I pronounce this correct, Queen and Open, which is from the colonial era to the present, is a new Standard Bank exhibition for 2016, and I believe it's going to be a permanent one for 2016. Now, it seeks to restore the memory of the Koisan people. How important do you think such a project is for not just the Koisan, but also for present-day South Africa?
Well, when we talk about Koisan, we are going to the very heart of the development of South African society, the very heart of the formation of South Africa as a modern part of Africa, but also of the globe. We once had the notion of Afrocentrism, but the question was, as it is now, can you have an Afrocentrism without the Koisan? My answer is no. Likewise, in terms of memory, there's a notion in South Africa that the Koisan, and it was projected by many, many historians from our institutions of higher learning, that's why they need to be transformed as well, that the Koisan were no more in South Africa. Yet, the colored population of South Africa, the majority are the descendants of the Koisan. So when we talk of memory, we've got to look at the mechanisms that were developed in the society to create a social death over the memory of the Koisan. So one needs to approach the Standard Bank exhibition with great caution.
Why would that be?
Well, for the simple reason, you know, with the attempted genocide of the Koisan in the formation of South Africa, colonialism had an ample space to refashion the descendants of the Koisan. They created an ethnicity called colored. But this was created on an ideology of the social death of the Koisan as a people. And as you know, the colored identity was formed of many identities. The Chinese even were regarded as colored. But the colonialists, the white colonialists, had such a space in this country to refashion an identity that was totally under their control. What we are seeing now happening in South Africa is phenomenal. The descendants of the Koisan, who are predominantly colored, are reclaiming the future, not only of that memory, but how that memory will be reconfigured. And I think that's what's significant for all South Africans in terms of what is happening. And I think we should watch that space, because it's actually a rewriting of the history of South African society that's in the making. It's early days, but it's a phenomenal development that we are about to see.
Is this perhaps a revolution of the Koisan?
Well, it's a revolution among colored people. That colored people have been socialized by colonialism and apartheid to be the purveyors of a certain identity that was not in their control. What we are beginning to see here is a refashioning of the identity of colored people as African people. And then, hence the reclaiming by the Koisan of that space in historical memory. But historical memory is also social memory. You know, I think that's very important because you're dealing with living human beings who have been entrapped in an identity imposed on South African society.
Will they be able to, the Koisan be able to reclaim that identity in South Africa?
Well, you know, anybody who knows history will tell you that the Khoi and San were not a provincial people in Africa. They stretched across the length and breadth of South Africa, and they were the first people in Europe. The Garibaldi people. Anybody who does research will tell you that the Koisan, the genealogy of the Koisan, is part of every African people across Africa. So we are seeing a